All right, we're on record in the time set for trial in State v. Gray, 3AN-10-02702. The jurors have entered the courtroom. Parties are present. You're now ready to serve as jurors. I'm going to give you some instructions this morning, and again, you'll be getting most of these instructions again in a written packet at the end. This is more to give you some guidance on how to deal with issues that may come up during the presentation of the case. I'm going to summarize the way this trial will be conducted. First, each side may make an opening statement. An opening statement is not evidence. It is simply an outline to help you understand what the party expects the evidence will show. Neither party is required to make an opening statement. The prosecution will then call witnesses and counsel for the defendant may cross-examine. Then the defendant may call witnesses and the prosecution may cross-examine. The defendant is under no obligation to call any witnesses or present any evidence. If the defendant presents evidence, the state may present rebuttal evidence. After the evidence has been presented, I will instruct you on the law that applies to the case, and the attorneys will make closing arguments. After that, you will go to the jury room to deliberate on your verdict. As I indicated, jury trials frequently have breaks. Generally, I try to take a break about every hour. Depending upon where we're at with a witness, if we're in the middle of some testimony, I may go an hour, 15 or so, but I really try to go every hour. If somebody needs a break, and it looks like I'm not getting to a break, you just need to let me know in some way. Raise your hand or just indicate in some way, because the intent is to make sure you're able to focus on what's going on. And if you're uncomfortable sitting over there, we need to take a break. Earlier, I gave you instructions on not discussing the case with others, not conducting your own investigation, and not to use the media to gain more information. I'm not going to give you that detailed admonishment every time we take a break or at the end of every day, but it applies throughout the trial. After opening statements, the evidence will be presented through sworn testimony of witnesses and any exhibits admitted into evidence by the court. You should consider the evidence in light of your common sense and experience in life, but cannot consider any information not admitted as evidence by the court. At the end of the trial, it's going to be your job to decide how much weight to give to the evidence and to evaluate the evidence according to the instructions that the court will give you. These instructions contain the law that must be applied in this case. When you consider the evidence, you must not be influenced by sentiment, prejudice, passion, or public opinion. You must base your verdict upon a fair consideration of the evidence. Excuse me. There are rules of law that control what evidence you can consider. You may only consider testimony and exhibits that are admitted as evidence. When an attorney asks a question or offers an exhibit, and the attorney on the other side thinks it is not permitted by the rules of evidence, that attorney may object. Then I will call the attorneys to the bench and rule on the objection. If I agree it is a valid objection, I will allow the question to be asked or the exhibit to be received. If I disagree, I will instruct the attorney to rephrase the question or to move on. As noted, if I overrule the objection, the question may be answered or the exhibit admitted. If I sustain an objection to an exhibit, the exhibit is not admitted. If I sustain an objection to a question, the witness may not answer the question, and you must disregard the question entirely. Don't draw any conclusions from the wording of the question or speculate as to what the witness would have said if permitted to answer the question. If I sustain an objection to a question after an answer has been given, I will instruct you to disregard both the question and the answer. Sometimes I may order that evidence be stricken from the record and instruct you to disregard that evidence. In that case, you must not consider it. You may wonder why some evidence must be excluded. Evidence rules are designed to do two things. First, they try to help you focus on important and reliable evidence. Second, these rules help you decide the case objectively without being swayed by information that might cause you to respond emotionally. It is because the law protects what jurors hear that we have such confidence in a jury being impartial. You must not consider the fact that the attorneys make objections or ask the court to take certain actions. Objections or requests are not evidence. My rulings that exclude evidence or questions are designed to ensure that you decide the case fairly. When I allow testimony or other evidence to be introduced over the objection of an attorney, I do not mean to suggest any opinion as to the weight or effect of that evidence. It will be your job to decide how much weight to give the evidence. Expert witnesses will be testifying in this case. An expert witness is a witness who has scientific, technical, or other specialized knowledge or experience. An expert witness may express an opinion in addition to testifying about factual matters. In determining whether to believe expert witnesses and the weight to give to their opinion, you should consider their knowledge and qualifications, the reasons given for their opinion, the information on which they base their opinion, and the factors given you for evaluating the testimony of any other witness which were given to you before voir dire. You are not required to accept an expert's opinion, but should give it the weight, if any, to which you find it entitled. As with other witnesses, you may believe all, part, or none of the testimony of an expert witness. A non-expert witness may testify to his or her opinion if it is rationally based on the witness's perceptions, and helpful to a clear understanding of their testimony. In determining the weight to be given to an opinion expressed by a non-expert witness, you should consider the witness's credibility, the extent of the witness's opportunity to perceive the matters upon which the opinion is based, and the reasons, if any, given for the witness's opinion. You are not required to accept a non-expert witness's opinion, but should give it the weight, if any, to which you find it entitled. You are not to decide any issue by the simple process of counting the number of witnesses who have testified on the opposing sides. The final test is not the number of witnesses, but whether, considering all the evidence, the state has proved each element of each charge beyond a reasonable doubt. A fact may be proved by direct evidence, by circumstantial evidence, or by both. Direct evidence is given when a witness testifies about an event that the witness personally saw or heard. Circumstantial evidence is given when a witness did not personally see or hear an event, but saw or heard something that, standing alone or taken together with other evidence, may lead a juror to conclude that the event occurred. By way of example, if before you go to bed on a winter night you look out your window and see it snowing, and you reach out the window and feel it on your hand, you have personal knowledge that it is snowing. This is direct evidence. But if when you go to sleep the sky and the ground are clear, and when you later awaken the ground is white and covered with snow, you can conclude that it snowed even though you did not see the snow fall. This is circumstantial evidence. Both types of evidence are admissible and may be considered by you. Neither is necessarily entitled to any greater weight than the other. A person's mental state may be shown by circumstantial evidence. It can rarely be established by any other means. Witnesses can see and hear and thus be able to give direct evidence of what another person does or does not do, but no one can see or hear the mental state the person had at the time the person acted or did not act. Yet what a person does or does not do may indicate that person's mental state. You may consider any statements made and acts done or not done by the person and all other facts and circumstances and evidence when determining a person's mental state. During the trial, I do not mean to suggest what you should find to be the facts of the case or that I believe or disbelieve any witness. If anything I do or say seems to suggest otherwise, you must disregard it and form your own opinion. You, the jury, will decide the verdict in this case. You have been given notebooks and pens. If you wish to do so, you may take notes during the trial to help you remember the evidence. But your primary function is to see and hear the witnesses and observe other evidence. Do not let note-taking interfere with your careful consideration of the evidence. Each time that you are excused from the courtroom, please leave your notebook behind. Your notes will be kept secure and will not be read by anyone. When you begin your deliberations, you may have your notes with you. If there is a disagreement during deliberations as to what any witness said, you may try to resolve it by comparing recollections with other jurors or by asking to listen to the recorded testimony of any witness. Remember that a juror's notes are not evidence and they may be incomplete. A juror's notes can only be used as a memory aid for that juror. When the case is over, your notebooks will be collected and destroyed without being read by anyone. All right, we're at a point for opening statements. The state may present an opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no other way to describe this. Terrence Gray executed Edwin Montrose. There's no other way to describe it. It was a cold-blooded execution. And Edwin was executed in the dining center as he sat on a small bench in a public place, a place that Edwin thought was safe. He was killed by a gunshot wound. The first shot entered just below his left eye, traveled through his face and came out his right cheek. That wound was not fatal. He would have survived that wound. The second wound entered his left chest, traveled through his left lung, through his heart, through his right lung, and came to rest in his arm. That wound killed him. That gunshot killed him. Edwin lived minutes. medical intervention would not have saved him. He could have been on the operating table, and that gunshot wound would not have saved him. Terrence Gray shot and killed Edwin from a distance of 6 to 24 inches. And all of that was because Edwin wanted to try to recover property that had been stolen from his house. All of that because Edwin's house had been burglarized and some stuff had been stolen just a couple days earlier. So for property, Edwin lost his life. Let me tell you a little bit about Edwin. Edwin and his significant other, Christmas Seal, in 2010, they lived on Brenner Circle. That's over off Lower. Edwin has 2 children, Sarah and Edwin Jr. At the time Edwin was killed, Sarah was 6, Edwin Jr. was 4. Edwin worked as a legal courier. He worked for his uncle, Dennis Johnson. In that position, he, just as the name sounds, delivered legal papers throughout the community. And in 2010, in February of 2010, Christmas in Edwin's home was burgled. The burglary happened around Wednesday the 24th. Nobody was home when the burglary happened, but Christmas was the first one to realize the home was burgled, because when she came home around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, she noticed the door had been jimmied. She walked in the house had been ransacked. She had her 4-year-old son with her when that happened. Her first instinct was to call Edwin, and she did. And Edwin came home. They asked the neighbors. Nobody had saw anything. They went to the house, and they tried to figure out what had been taken. What they know is their dog, Blue, a little pit bull, had been locked in the bathroom. So they walked to the house, they tried to figure out what had been taken. Not a lot taken, nothing really big, but stuff that was still important. Things like some costume jewelry, a jar full of coins, a shoebox with a little bit of money, a shoebox where they throw their dollar bills in at the end of every day. That jar of coins that everybody has in their house where they throw those coins in. And a couple PlayStations. And some games. Something that you can track, something that you can look for. Edwin and Christmas didn't call the police. Why would they? What were the police going to do? The neighbors didn't see anything. They weren't home when it happened. Not a lot was taken. So instead, Edwin started asking around. He started asking people if anybody knew anything. And he also went on Craigslist. And he started looking on Craigslist to see if any of his stuff had been stolen. Excuse me, if any of his stuff had been found or was being sold on Craigslist. And he found a Craigslist ad. PS3 40 gig with 2 controllers, ABS plugs, power cord. Contact me, 720-9374, name's T. That description sounded very familiar. That description sounded very similar to his PlayStation. That was on Thursday. So that's the day after the burglary. On Friday, Edwin has to work, so Edwin asks his uncle, Dennis Johnson, to try to help find, or excuse me, to help to go and check out or to go look at that PlayStation. So he does. So Dennis does that. Dennis says, "Hey, you know what? I can do that for you. You got stuff to do. I'll go and I'll go and look at the PlayStation." So Dennis calls up T, says, "Hey, I want to go look at this PlayStation." Goes and looks at it. goes to an apartment on 5th Avenue, 945 5th Avenue. That apartment was Terence Gray's. Dennis Johnson went and talked to Terence Gray. And he walked in, and Terence Gray was selling a PlayStation. This PlayStation right here, $200. Dennis bought it. It fit the description. It looked like Edwin's. Edwin wanted his PlayStation. Wanted a PlayStation. If he couldn't have his PlayStation, he wanted a PlayStation. So he bought it. He gave it back. Dennis gave it back to Edwin. Edwin went home, fired it up. Surprise, surprise! This was one of the PlayStations that was stolen from their house 2 days before. So now Edwin has said, "Now I know who has at least some of my stuff." So Edwin does what a reasonable person would do, and he calls Terence. And he says, "Hey, let's talk. Where's my stuff?" So they agree to meet. They agree to meet on Saturday. That's this. On Saturday the 27th. They agree to meet first at Costco. They meet at Costco. They both go to Costco. And to Edwin is going to Costco to meet with Terence on his way or immediately before he goes to his nephew's basketball game. That was his plan. His plan was go talk to T, Terence Gray, talk to him about the stuff that had been stolen, go to his nephew's basketball game. Edwin was with Dennis Johnson, his uncle, and Shelton McCarty, Dennis's foster son. Dennis's adult foster son. So, to Edwin, this was just a stop during the day. To Terence, it was something different. To T, it was something different. Because what T did was he dressed up in a costume. He disguised himself. He put on a fake wig. He put on a fake mustache. He put on a big white hoodie. And he armed himself with a .40 caliber pistol. And we know that because when they went to Costco, when T walked into Costco, the loss prevention at Costco they found him so strange and acting so weird that they began to follow him. Loss prevention went on the floor, they began to follow him, they pulled up surveillance, and they followed him throughout Costco on surveillance. And so one of the things you're going to see throughout this trial is you're going to see all this surveillance video. So they watched Terence come into Costco in a disguise. And it wasn't even a good disguise. It was a disguise of such poor design that it caught loss prevention's attention. They thought that he was going to rob the place. So they started following him, trying to figure out what he's doing. Now, at this point, Costco, it's Saturday, the 27th. Costco's closing. Costco closes at 6. So they're moving everybody out. Edwin is outside. Edwin is with Dennis and Shelton. Edwin hasn't come into Costco. Terence is inside. He's on his phone. Costco's closing. Can't meet at Costco. Let's meet at Diamond Center. So they move to Diamond Center. But that doesn't stop the loss prevention employees at Costco from continuing to follow Terence. They follow him outside. They literally find him so strange that they pull up the surveillance camera and they follow him throughout the parking lot. And these are still photos from the surveillance camera you'll see throughout this trial. And they follow him. And they watch him get into this old two-tone blue Suburban. Terence is acting so strange that they zoom in on the license plate. They don't know what's about to happen. But they know that it's so strange they zoom in on the license plate. And they follow him out. So, Edwin, because Costco's closing, he goes to Diamond Center. And so, Edwin comes into Diamond Center, and they agree to meet at Bosco's. So Edwin goes into Bosco's, and he's hanging out in Bosco's. T doesn't. What T does is he parks down below, behind Forever 21. He then comes in to Forever 21 in the back entrance, nowhere near Bosco's. And surveillance video shows him coming in. This barbershop shows him walking by on the far side, over here. This is Edwin. Edwin's the one not in a costume. Here's Terrence. They meet up. This is surveillance video from Boston. Here's one other thing that Terrence did between Costco and Bosco's. He put on gloves. Surveillance video from Costco shows he's not wearing gloves. Now he's wearing gloves. He still has his wig on. He still has his fake mustache on. He still has his cap on. They come out of the Diamond Center together. Edwin's walking behind. They sit down on this park bench. They sit down on this park bench. This park bench is right here. They walk out. They sit down. Edwin sits on the north side of the bench. Edwin sits here. Terrence sits here. And they have a conversation. We know they have a conversation and not an argument because this mall is packed with people. And you'll hear from dozens of witnesses that say this conversation was not heated, it was not argumentative. You know what? I forgot something. I forgot something because one of the things that that T did before they met in Bosco's is that when T comes walking through here and when he's walking up towards Bosco's, I can't believe I forgot this. He comes in and as opposed to going straight to Bosco's, that's not what he does. Before he goes to Bosco's, he goes into the bathroom. And he goes in the bathroom and he adjusts his wig. He adjusts his mustache. We know that because there's a person by the name of Jason Dorcas in the bathroom who, after the shooting, talks to police and he says, that was the strangest thing. The guy that ultimately killed Edwin was in the bathroom adjusting all his mask, adjusting his wig. He comes out of the bathroom, doesn't go to Bosco's. He comes over here to this box that's labeled 163. This is a little rippy pull tab. And as opposed to going into Bosco's, he stands behind this rippy counter, looks into Bosco's, and he's just staring at somebody. Just staring at somebody. The woman who works at that rippy's pull tab place, her name's Debbie Barnett. Debbie Barnett will tell you that she, like everybody else, thought this was very strange. Asked this guy, do you need any help? This guy's in a wig, this guy's in a fake mustache, and he's not looking at anybody except he's got his eyes face forward. In her words, he's stalking somebody. Not my words. Her words. He's stalking somebody. After she's done stalking Edwin, he goes into Bosco's, they meet up, they come out. They go to the park bench. Conversation's about 2.5 minutes long. It's not heated, it's not argumentative. And After about 2.5 minutes, Terrence Gray stands up and walks away. He walks about 4-5 steps, stops, turns around, pulls out a gun, and shoots Edwin twice. As Edwin is sitting on the park bench, facing forward. First round goes in his left eye, out his cheek. Second round goes into his left chest, comes to rest in his right eye. And Edwin falls and dies right here. Our first 911 caller, Debbie Barnett. Debbie Barnett, she's the pull attendant. She's the one who said he was stalking somebody. Terrence turns and he starts to run. As he runs, Dennis Johnson will tell you that what he perceives is that Terrence runs, he picks up the gun, he points the gun at Dennis, and he starts pulling the trigger. Gun doesn't go off. Terrence goes and keeps running through the mall. He runs through here, down, through Forever 21, and out. Surveillance video shows him running into Forever 21, through the store. There he is, still wearing his gloves. And at this point, as you can imagine, the mall is scattered. People in the mall are going everywhere. And you see people running. And you see Terrence Gray running out of the mall. Dennis Johnson was feet from Edwin when he was killed. Dennis Johnson was standing over here. He went into the mall with Edwin. Because they didn't know. They didn't know Chief. He watched Edwin get killed in front of his eyes. His immediate reaction was to run up and check on Edwin. He checks on Edwin, he stands up and he starts to run after Terrence. He starts to run, but he's kind of in this place where, does he run after Terrence Gray, who's running out the mall, or does he stay with his nephew, who's just been shot and killed? He runs back. Now at this point, people are scattering. There are some people who are running away. There's a EMT in Mad Hatter who runs up and tries to start giving first aid. It's unsuccessful. Tries to give CPR. It doesn't work. Shelton McCarty, Dennis's foster son, was in the car during this. He hears the shots. He comes in. When he comes in, he sees just a pandemonium of everything going on, and he sees Edwin on the ground. He runs up, and Dennis says he went that way. He went that way. So Shelton starts chasing after Terrence Gray. Shelton runs down this way, and he runs out these doors. Shelton didn't know where Terrence Gray went. He didn't see him run through Forever 21. Shelton wasn't there. Shelton was armed that day. He had his own weapon. So when he runs out, he has his gun out. Off-duty trooper Mangold, happens to be in the Billabong store with his kids. He hears the gunshots. First thing he does, he grabs his children, he pulls them back to the back of the store. He tells the store clerk, shut these doors, lock these gates. I'm an off-duty state trooper. And he goes and he engages. This is Trooper Mangold, right here. This is a vantage point. This video is north. It's the camera's north, shooting east. Boss goes. There's the pull tab. Officer Mangold doesn't know what happened. What he knows is he's heard 2 gunshots. He runs out, and he runs up this way. And when he runs up, all he hears is the shooter went that way. Got a green jacket. Now the green jacket, that's interesting because that's what Shelton's wearing. Shelton's wearing the Oakland A's jacket. So Trooper Mangold says he sees somebody running away. He sees an individual who is clearly been shot, who's dying, and he sees Shelton McCarty running away. And he was just told, shooter's going that way, green jacket. So Trooper Mangold says that's a suspect, and he then gives chase. So this is Shelton McCarty. Shelton McCarty comes out this door, and as he comes out this door, he's looking for Terrence Gray. He doesn't know him, but he's looking for him. Trooper Mangold comes out behind him at guard and takes Shelton into custody, and he recovers Shelton's pistol. Because at this point, Mangold doesn't know Shelton's involvement. As he's taking Shelton into custody, as he's detaining him, this jewelry store owner comes running out and runs up to Trooper Mangold and says, "You got the wrong guy. You got the wrong guy. This isn't him." Ladies and gentlemen, Terrence Gray wasn't arrested at the Diamond Center that night. What you're about to watch is the video in which Terrence Gray killed Edwin. So I tell you that, and I preface that, but that's what we're about to see. It's 4 minutes, 44 seconds. The homicide occurs at about 3 minutes. Terrence Gray, Edwin is right behind this pillar. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, Terrence Gray wasn't arrested that night. Instead, he ran out of Forever 21, and that when he ran out, he went and jumped in that same two-tone, older blue Suburban. We know that because we have witnesses who, after shooting, watched him run out, watched him get in that vehicle. The vehicle was ultimately recovered by Anchorage Police Department several days later. We know it's the same vehicle because we have the hospital video in which they zoomed in on that license plate. Mr. Gray wasn't arrested until several weeks later. When he's arrested, he's found in possession of his laptop. His laptop has his information on it. It has his photos on it. It has his internet history, including Craigslist history, and photos that he took of himself wearing that white hoodie. What we don't have is we don't have the wig. We don't have a mustache. We don't have a murder. We do have cell phone tower information, which shows that at the time of the homicide, Terrence Gray and his cell phone are in that Diamond Center area, right along with Edmonds, because they're communicating back and forth because Costco is closed. Ladies and gentlemen, for this, Mr. Gray is charged with one count of first-degree murder for the intentional murder of Edwin, one count of attempted murder for the attempted murder of Dennis Johnson, and one count of assault in the third degree against Dennis Johnson, which is recklessly placing someone else in fear of serious physical injury by pointing that firearm. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Defense may make its opening statement.
Your Honor, Mr. Alexander, Mr. Henderson, Mr. Gray, ladies and gentlemen, perception is reality. That's what this case is about. For Edwin Matos, his perception was that Terrence Gray was behind the people who broke into his house, who stole his stuff, who ransacked his place, where he sleeps, where he lives, where his wife and children live. That was his perception. To the police, their perception in this case was that they had a crime that was on video. You can see it. There's no need to dig much further than that. There's no need to find out what was going on in the days leading up to this. That was their perception. That was their reality. Perception is what made Terrence Gray terrified at that mall when you saw him there. Not everybody's quaking when they're terrified, but that man was terrified. He was terrified of what was going to happen if he didn't meet with Mr. Matos. He was terrified of what was going to happen if he did meet Mr. Matos. He was terrified when the explanation for how he came to get this PlayStation that he was given to Mr. Matos was not going over well. He was terrified when Mr. Matos said to him, "You're coming with us." He was terrified when Mr. Matos, on that phone, said to the person on the other end, "I'm going to have to shoot this motherfucker." Make no mistake, he was terrified. That was his perception. That is reality. That's the reality of this case. This is not a senseless killing over a PlayStation and a couple of things that were stolen out of that house. There's no question that Mr. Matos' house was ransacked. There's no question that somebody kicked in that door. And there's no question that Edwin Matos was furious about it. He was angry about it. This is where he lived. This is where his young children were. This is where his wife was. They came in and they stole things. A PlayStation, we know that. What else was stolen? We're probably never going to know. But whatever was stolen was so much that Mr. Matos was furious. He was angry, and you'll know that he was furious. You'll know that he was angry. Because in the day after, on the 26th of March, Mr. Matos went and visited someone that he's known. Someone that he's known from childhood. A man named Jamar Alex. He went and visited Mr. Alex at his work at Morrison Alley. And when he showed up there, Mr. Alex, I expect you're going to hear from him. I expect you're going to hear that he's known Mr. Matos for a long time. Mr. Matos was hot. He was angry, and he had a gun. And he wanted to know who had done this, because he thought that Mr. Alex was behind it. He thought that Mr. Alex and a couple guys named G and Ant, Warren Brooks and Anthony Williams, were the ones who had broken into his house, who had taken his stuff. He wanted to know where they lived. It was enough that he confronted this person that he's known, who has come to his house with his children. Their children played with each other, barbecues. And when he put two and two together, he thought that Jamar Alex had betrayed him. Because he thought that Jamar Alex was behind it. He thought that Jamar Alex had sent G and Ant to his house to do this. So he confronted him. And at the end of that, you're going to see and you're going to know that this is not over a PlayStation. This is not because Mr. Matos couldn't play Call of Duty anymore. This is much more serious. For Terrence Gray, this case began simply enough. His friend Warren Brooks, G, had a PlayStation from somebody that owed him some money. So Mr. Gray said, "I'll sell it for you. I'll put it on Craigslist, same way that he got his own PlayStation." And Mr. Gray would be able to keep a few extra dollars himself. So, before going to bed on that Thursday night, the 25th of February, he put it on Craigslist just before midnight. He went to bed. And the next morning, he got a pretty quick response. Sometime in the morning, he got a phone call from a man named Howard. Howard was looking for a PlayStation. Howard said he wanted to buy it for his son. What comes with the PlayStation? Are there controllers? Is there a game? Is Call of Duty with it? If that had been Howard on the other end, you probably would have never heard of Terrence Gray ever in your life. The person on the other end of that phone call was Dennis Howard Johnson. Dennis Howard Johnson's many things. One of those things is a private investigator. Someone who does surveillance, who follows people, who watches people. And so Terrence, not thinking much of it, says, yeah, come on by. And sure enough, Dennis Johnson comes by about an hour or so later. When Mr. Johnson is showing up at that house, lo and behold, outside of that apartment, he sees Warren Brooks. He sees Anthony Williams. Mr. Johnson tells the police he recognized them. He recognized them from a barbecue or something. He knew who they were. And from Mr. Johnson, he quickly put two and two together. Now he had a suspect. Now he had somebody that he could tie to this. And that person was Terrence Gray. He threw the money down. He took that PlayStation. And if this case was just about a PlayStation, if that's all that they wanted back, was just a PlayStation and a few things, they knew exactly where he lived. They knew his phone number. They knew he went by T. All they had to do was call the police. They never did. Not once. No. Ladies and gentlemen, they wanted Jamar, they wanted Ann, they wanted G. They wanted to know where those guys lived, because they wanted to visit them. That same afternoon, not long after, Warren Brooks was going to come by Terrence's house. Because after Dennis Johnson had bought that PlayStation, after Warren had seen Dennis Johnson coming in, he had called G and said, don't sell it to him. Don't sell it to him. Terrence didn't know where that PlayStation had come from. That's what the evidence will show you. In that clunky exchange, Mr. Johnson walked away with that PlayStation. Terrence called up G. They talked. And eventually, not long after, Warren Brooks was going to come by Terrence's house. He was expecting. So, Terrence heard a knock at the door. He's expecting his friend. He opens the door. He isn't looking. And in an instant, the person on the other end of that door is Edwin Matos. Edwin Matos stands right in front of him and he puts a gun in his face. And he says, look here, motherfucker. I know you hit my house. I know you got my shit. I know what you look like. I know what you live. I know where you drive. I'm going to be in touch. Mr. Gray didn't know him. But Mr. Gray knew that that person, when he opened that door, when he said those things, when he put a gun in his face, that is not the person whose PlayStation he wanted to be holding when the music stopped. And he was. And he was terrified. True enough, later that afternoon, Edwin Matos called Mr. Gray. He wanted to know how he had gotten that PlayStation, and Mr. Gray told him the story as best he could. The story as he knew it, that Warren Brooks had gotten it from two guys that owed him money, KC and Vinny. But he didn't want to get his friend in this mix either. He didn't want G to be in this mix either. So he told him he got it from a cousin. He told him a story, and it didn't go over very well. And Mr. Matos told him, you got 24 hours to find these guys and tell me where they live. So that evening, that night, Terrence Gray, Warren Brooks, set about to try and find Casey and Vinny. But didn't have any luck. Sometime after midnight, Terrence Gray calls Mr. Matos, tries to call him a couple times. No answer. They needed more time. There was no answer. The next day, there was more phone calls exchanged between Mr. Matos and Mr. Gray. Mr. Matos mentions to Mr. Gray, I saw you called me last night. What do you want? We need more time. All right, well, here's what we'll do. If you meet with me, if you talk to me face to face, if you tell me this story, I'll find these guys myself. We're going to meet. Let's meet at your place. After Mr. Matos had shown up at that house, Terence Gray did not sleep another night in his bed. He wasn't going to be staying there. He wasn't going to meet with Mr. Matos there. And so the place that they agreed upon was the only place that Mr. Gray could think of, the concession area at Costco. Because for Mr. Gray, that would be a public place, and if there were other people with Mr. Matos, he would see it. So that was the agreement. That's where they would meet in a few hours. In the lead up to that, Mr. Gray starts thinking, and he starts talking, and he talks to Warren Brooks again. Sounded like a setup. Starts to get Mr. Gray thinking that Mr. Matos is going to have other people there. Mr. Gray can't bring Warren with him. That's exactly who they're looking for. That's who they want. They know what he looks like too. So, Terence does the only thing that he can think of at that moment. He remembers that he's got this ridiculous, stupid Halloween costume that has an afro and a mustache. And he thinks to himself, I'm going to wear this, and when I show up, I'll be able to at least see whether there's anybody there, whether there's anybody that looks suspicious to me. And if there is, then I can get out of there. So he puts it on. You saw just a little bit of that in that video. That is the most ridiculous getup that you will ever see. And you will hear witness after witness tell you, that was so obvious, he stuck out like a sore thumb. And not just a sore thumb, but a sore thumb that's been hit with a hammer for a week. I mean, everybody saw this guy and saw this disguise and how ridiculous it was. And so, when Terence showed up at Costco, you saw, you'll hear, he was quickly followed by loss prevention. It was closing time. It wasn't going to work, and Terence was still terrified. He didn't know what was going on. So he calls up Mr. Matos. This isn't going to work. They're following me. It's about closing time. Mr. Matos tells him, you gave me your word. If you don't meet with me, then you're the scapegoat. You're the one I'm coming after. Where are you at? Between all that, they agree to meet at the Diamond Center. It's not somewhere that Terence was particularly familiar with. You know that Mr. Matos was wanting to see Mr. Gray, was wanting to confront Mr. Gray, was wanting to hear that story. And the reason why you know it is because between 6:07 and 6:24, Mr. Matos called Terence Gray's phone over and over and over and over and over 17 times. 17 unanswered calls to Terence Gray to get him to show up. Because they wanted to know where he and G were. Terence Gray was having second thoughts. He wasn't sure what to do, but eventually he showed up. He walked around the mall, tried to fix his disguise so that he could see whether there was anybody there. And when he sat there and he watched and he was looking and he could see in Bosco's and he saw Mr. Matos, he looked alone. So he went over there and they met up, and you see it on video. These two aren't strangers. They've seen each other before, even in that ridiculous getup. So they went and they sat down on that bench. Arguments don't need loud words. What was going on that bench was Mr. Matos in a calm fury, wanting to know who was behind it. You saw in the video, and you'll see in the evidence, that while they're sitting on this bench, Dennis Johnson is walking around all over, hovering, perception. Terrence Gray sees him. He says to Mr. Matos, "What's he doing here?" Mr. Matos tells him, "Don't worry about him. There's other people here too." Perception. For Mr. Gray, he was surrounded. That was what was in his head. For the police, when they looked at that video, they said there's no arguing, there's nothing. It fits a worldview of senseless violence over the silliest of things. So the witness who was sitting there in that chair that you saw getting his hair cut, he describes it to the police as a business conversation. Not something between friends, but something that was serious. A business conversation. As they sat there, Terrence Gray started talking. He started trying to tell the story, trying to keep G out of it. He was stumbling. It wasn't coming out right. Mr. Matos must have been sitting there thinking, "This fool, who does he think he is, coming here and telling me this?" He must have been seething. But at that same time, cool. Because he feels completely in power there. Because he holds all the cards. At some point in that conversation, when that explanation goes wrong, Mr. Matos tells him, "You're coming with me. We're going to find Casey. We're going to find Ann. We're going to find G. We're going to find Vinny. You're coming with me." Mr. Gray gets up and he tries to walk away. And by this point, Mr. Johnson, standing off camera, hands in his pockets, saw Mr. Gray walk away. But that conversation wasn't over. He motions for him to go back. When Terrence Gray comes back, he stands there. Mr. Matos tells him, "You act like you got a choice." For Terrence Gray, he had no choice. He wasn't going anywhere. Mr. Gray sees the gun. He hears Mr. Matos on the phone and telling the person on the other end, "I'm going to have to shoot this motherfucker." And at that point, he looks, he turns, he sees Johnson standing there. He turns back. He sees Edwin Matos. He is terrified. He's surrounded. He has no choice. He's tried to leave. He's tried to walk away, and he's been stopped. He knows he's not going anywhere freely. He knows he's going for a ride, at least. And so in that second, in that split second, with his perception, what his reality was and what the reality was, he pulled out a gun and he shot him twice. Thought he missed the first time, and he shot him the second time. And he was out of there because he didn't know who else was there. He didn't know what else was going to happen. He left, he ran, and he got out of there as fast as he could. That's not the end of the story. You're going to hear all of this evidence and more. There's one thing, though, about this case that should sharpen your skepticism when you listen to Mr. Johnson, when you listen to Mr. Matos' family and friends, when you listen to the witnesses in the case. And that thing is this. Shelton McCarty was there that day. Where he was, we don't know. Maybe he was outside. When Shelton McCarty came in, he ran in, and he saw Mr. Matos there, shot twice, bleeding, dying on the ground. This person who he knows that his dad calls his cousin, when he sees him there clinging to life, and he runs after him. He runs after where he thinks Mr. Gray went. And he gets there, Trooper Mangold gets him on the ground, they arrest him. When the police talk to him and pose the same question over and over to him, you know this guy? You know this guy that got shot? Shelton McCarty's answer, over and over, I don't know him. I don't know that guy. Why? Why would you say that? Unless there was something more to this story. At the end of this case, ladies and gentlemen, after you hear about the threats, the fear, the intimidation, I'm going to ask you to find that Mr. Gray truly had no choice there. He couldn't walk away. He was hemmed in. He couldn't retreat. He couldn't de-escalate. He was going somewhere against his will or worse. Ladies and gentlemen, every death is a tragedy. There's no question about it. Every death is sadness. But what the evidence is going to show you in this case is that what Mr. Gray did was justified. It's the only thing that he could do. The evidence and the witnesses at the end of this case are going to tell you that you don't need to celebrate what happened there that day. It's a tragedy. No question. But what happened there that day, what the evidence is going to show you, was lawful self-defense. At the end of this case, I'm going to ask you for your verdicts of not guilty. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Members of the jury, we're going to take about a 15-minute break before the evidence starts. Okay, we're back on record. The jurors are not present. Counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to give the court a brief heads up as to our order of witnesses and give Mr. Kelly the opportunity to make preliminary evidentiary objections so we can go kind of address it efficiently. The first witness for the state is going to be the 911, not the actual dispatch, but the dispatch supervisor for the purposes of introducing a CD with all the 911 calls from this event from the Diamond Mall. Okay. The state only intends on publishing one, the first one, which is approximately 90 seconds from Miss Debbie Barnett. Miss Barnett, if the court will recall, just as a proffer from the video, is the woman who works in the full tab booth, is closest to the events, and is actually comes over on a corded telephone to render aid to Mr. Matos while at the same time talking with 911. It's the state's position that her statements, and she will be testifying in trial as well, but that her 911 call has independent probative value to the jury and is admissible under at least 4 grounds under 803, both as a present sense impression, excited utterance, because her call is almost immediately contemporaneous with the shots, and in fact in the background she's describing Mr. Gray running away. She thinks she hears another shot while this is going on, as well as, so it's a hodgepodge of her excited utterance, her present sense impression, and then she's relaying Mr. Matos's medical condition to the dispatcher and receiving instructions on how to apply compression to his wounds.
Right. If I understand correctly, though, the disc actually has a lot of other 911 calls that aren't going to be played?
They're not going to be published. I believe that they're admissible under the same grounds. If, just for the purposes of saving time now, what the 911 center does is brings just an entire disc.
Right.
I'd be happy to have further argument on that subject about the relevance and admissibility of the other ones, not publish any of the other ones, and then I can make a new exhibit pending the court's ruling.
Okay, yeah, that would make more sense if all we're going to do now is do the first ones. Any objection to the first?
Yeah, Judge. With respect to the whole disc and the other phone calls as well, I mean, I think that at some point it just becomes cumulative, and I don't know what relevance.
Well, that's why I'm not going to rule on everything until the real question now is to proceed as to whether the first 90-second one.
With respect to that one, Judge, the main objection that I've got to it, understanding what the state is saying about hearsay, the main objection that I've got to it is that you do hear Mr. Matos. I think the medical term is agonal breathing, but essentially he's moaning and wailing. And I don't see what relevance it is. It just inflames the passions of the jury, inflames sympathy. of it to hear him struggling like that, and I don't see what relevance that has to the case, given the posture of the case and what the arguments are going to be. So I would object to that as being unduly prejudicial, not really probative of anything.
Okay, so it's a 403.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to listen to the 90 seconds.
Yeah.
Can I play that for the court?
Yes.
Just to explain for the court, Mr. Kelly, the first 57 seconds of the first call is actually overlap from the second missing pet call. So the call that we're talking about with Ms. Barnett starts 57 seconds into this first audio track that's provided by APD.
Which won't be played to the jury.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I'm just explaining why.
I was trying to figure out why the first 57 seconds would be applicable. Okay. Thanks, counsel.
Oh, Tony Center, right at the mall, somebody was just shot. He was shot twice. He's inside, and he's right next to a Brady's. Oh, God, he's still shooting. He's still shooting.
Hold on here.
Oh, shit. I'm out here in the middle.
Hold on, we're going to get somebody to you.
Oh, my God. The guy you're looking for has a wig on. He has a fake mustache, a fake wig. He has a fake beard. He was standing here at my booth. Oh, my God.
Okay, did you white black your name?
He is mixed black. Mixed black.
Did you say he was wearing a wig?
Yes, he had a curly wig on. He had a white sweatshirt. He had a white sweatshirt.
Okay, what direction did he run in this moment?
He ran towards the bus stop.
Is that going to be on the west side?
Turn him over. Put something under his head. Turn him over. I know that much. Here.
Okay, where are our victims by O'Brady? By O'Brady, ma'am?
By O'Brady's.
Okay, gotcha. How many times was he shot?
He was shot twice.
Where was he shot?
I'm sorry, what?
Shot.
He was shot in he was shot in the face. Here. Put this under him. Put this under him. Oh, God. I don't know if he's breathing or not. Here, I don't care if my coat gets nasty. I don't care. Come on. Open tunnel. Oh, my God. I'm sorry, what? I'm trying to help this guy.
I've got all kinds of help coming to you. What's your name?
My name is Debbie Barnett.
Debbie Barnett?
Yes. Help, get him over.
Hey, can you tell me anything you want about this black guy?
The guy that's with him, turn his head sideways so he doesn't choke. Sideways. Sideways.
Turn him on his side. Turn him on his side.
Oh my God, I think he's dead. Turn him sideways so he doesn't choke. He has to turn him on his side. On his side.
Debbie, are you there?
On his side.
Get him up.
Hold him on his side, please, so he doesn't choke.
Debbie, are you there?
Yes.
I'm going to get you through to the ambulance, okay?
Okay. Oh my God. Did you clear his mouth out? You need to clear his mouth out. Make sure there's nothing in there. You've got gloves on, clear his mouth out.
Fire department, this is going to be right on, okay?
Okay.
And the next...
Okay. It's clear. I don't know.
What's breathing? He's not breathing. He's not breathing.
Not breathing.
Where are you at?
Yeah, right next to the bench.
Where at?
By Brady's, right inside the door. They'll be able to see us. Oh God, he needs help. He's dying.
Okay, so are you in the Diamond Mall?
Yes, at the Diamond Mall, right in the door, inside.
Inside near O'Brady's?
There's no pulse.
Okay, listen, what's the phone number you're calling from?
What?
What's the phone number you're calling from?
349-2827.
What's your
Oh my
first name?
God, don't let him die, please.
What's your first name?
My first name is Debbie Barnett. Somebody needs to do CPR. Does anybody know it? Get over here if you know it.
What happened to it?
Oh my God, he's been shot in the chest and the face. I think he's dead.
Okay, listen, I've got a couple questions for you while we get some help started.
Yes.
You get some clean, dry cloths and towels, and once you put it on it, press down firmly and don't lift it up to look, okay?
Okay, on his chest?
On both wounds.
Okay. The ambulance says take a white cloth, press it down on the wound, and do not move it.
Approximately how old is he?
Oh God, he's gone. He is about 25 to 30 years old.
Okay, and I just want to confirm, is he
Right
awake?
here.
Is he awake?
No, he is
breathing?
No. He's dead. They're working on him now. Somebody's trying to do CPR to help him.
Okay, where's the person that did this?
He ran out the back door to the bus station.
Is there serious bleeding?
Yes.
All right, I'm sending the paramedics to help you stay in line. I'll tell you exactly what to do next.
Okay, what do we do?
Like I said, I'm going to tell you how to stop the bleeding. Listen carefully. I want you to get a clean, dry cloth or towel, place it right on the wound.
Place it on the wound.
Press
Where's the wound?
and don't lift
Here it is, right here. Right here. Press. Do not let go. Keep pressing. Don't take it away to look.
Okay. All right, listen, I want you to lay it. Make sure he's flat on his back on the ground.
He is on his back. They're doing CPR.
Okay, is there some...
We can't give him any air, any breath, because nobody's got a mouth.
Is there anything in his mouth?
No, there is not. They cleared his mouth.
Did you say that there's somebody doing CPR?
Yes, there's a person doing CPR right now.
Are they trained on it?
They're doing chest compressions.
Okay. Yeah, listen carefully. I'm going to tell you how to do the compressions.
Okay.
Make sure they've got the heel of their hand on the breastbone and the center.
They do. The paramedics are here.
The medics.
And he's...
All right, any additional argument?
Just as I listened to it again, I guess I could possibly understand the relevance of her description of the person going to the bus stop and whatnot, but all the other things about performing chest compressions, about providing aid and all that, I just don't know what relevance it has, and I don't know that really any of that is going to add anything more than what Ms. Barnett is going to testify about. I mean, she's given a couple different statements. That's what she says on that is pretty much what she said the whole time. So I don't know what relevance it has.
Any response?
Your Honor, other than to say that Ms. Barnett, during the course of the 911 call, is narrating the events as they occur in the immediate aftermath of the assault that's in question here, and that includes both her observations as to Mr. Matos' medical condition, her immediate testimony regarding the identity of the shooter and where the shooter is left, which is still an element that the state has to prove regardless of whether or not that's being conceded by the defense in a self-defense argument. And it's significant not only for what she's saying, but also what she's not saying. Mr. Kelly, during his opening statement, has made arguments about the context of what was happening, other people who were present, and there's a lot going on that tape that will bear directly on the jury's consideration of the events as they occurred after the shooting, and we'll be able to match it up pretty closely to the video that we anticipate introducing that was offered in opening statement as well, where you can see Ms. Barnett walking around talking on the telephone and kneeling down, but there's no audio from that feed. Presumably, if there had been audio from a camera from that feed, that would be just as admissible on the same grounds as the 911 call, and that will help on several different grounds address very pertinent issues for the jury's consideration of this case.
All right, the court's going to find under 403 that it's more probative than prejudicial. I will remind counsel that one of the instructions that the jurors get is that they're not to allow passion, prejudice, or public opinion to interfere with their decision of their decision on the case and their review of the evidence. Certainly, it's prejudicial to some extent. The question is it more probative than prejudicial? And I think it is, so I'll allow it to be played.
And Judge, if I could just be clear on I want to be clear on my record in terms of what I'm asking for is that the portions that include the agonal breathing, that the portions that include Ms. Barnett and the attempts at life-saving measures be redacted from this exhibit. So that's my objection.
Okay, so you're saying play the part about the description of the shooter running away, in this case, allegedly the defendant. All right, state.
Yeah.
They've modified their argument, your position.
Your Honor, I understand, and in the ease of convenience under other circumstances, I would absolutely be willing to make redactions if they seemed appropriate. Here, it's impossible to extract what Mr. Kelly thinks are Ms. Barnett's only pertinent observations from the just general bedlam that's going on at the time. And again, the relevance and probative nature of that for the jury is largely Ms. Barnett's direct observations, but also the fact that she's providing medical attention to the victim and what other people are saying in the background. The state will submit that at certain points you hear Mr. Johnson in the background, you hear other witnesses in the background talking. All of that is relevant and highly probative for the jury's consideration as to a self-defense claim as well in the aftermath.
All right, and the court will specifically find that, frankly, I didn't think the agonal breathing was overriding. Her conversation certainly was the most obvious thing during that. At some point I was aware that, in fact, agonal breathing is what we were talking about, but I don't find that more prejudicial than probative. I'm going to allow the playing of the tape.
Your Honor, can I just preview for Mr. Kelly the rest of the witnesses here? I don't anticipate that necessarily the rest of it will be objectionable, but just in case it is.
No, it's easier if we do it now, so I appreciate that. Go ahead.
Just quickly, the next witness after the 911 operator will be Clifford Duncan, who is a civilian witness from Costco, who will testify to his observations of Mr. Gray. The second two witnesses will be Christy Huff and Darren Akers, who are Costco employees who recorded Mr. Gray. So we have video exhibits to offer through that as well. Still images from which the court should have a copy on the bench, and some of them were shown in openings. Following the Costco witnesses, we'll have A.J. Burkhart, who was the security manager at Diamond Mall, who provided the Diamond Mall, that kind of like Bosco perspective down the hallway to APD. So we have that exhibit. These are largely foundational witnesses today for the video stuff. Then Marcel Henderson, who was an eyewitness, who was the security manager at Forever 21, saw Mr. Gray's flight and then gave APD 3 CDs of surveillance footage from Forever 21, of which the court's seen there's about 5 seconds of which is actually useful. If we have time at the end of the day, which we may not get to, Officer Mary Bolt's on deck to be our last witness.
Okay. All right. Recognizing that as the evidence comes in, there may be additional objections. Does that raise any objections right now? Okay. All right. Let's go. Are we ready for the jury? All right. Let's bring them in.
You want me to put the first witness on stand so we're ready to go?
Yeah. All right, let the record reflect the jurors have returned to the courtroom. We have a witness on the stand. Madam Clerk, if you'd go ahead and swear in the witness.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give in this court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. For the record, would you please state and spell both your first and last name?
Luanna, Luanna, Graybear, Greybear.
Counsel, you may inquire.
Good morning, ma'am. How are you? Excited to be in court, or maybe not so much. Can you please tell me where you're working currently?
I am working with the Anchorage Police Department.
And what do you do for APD, ma'am?
I'm a communications clerk too. I'm a dispatcher.
And is it accurate? Is that a 911 dispatcher?
Yes.
And what are some of your responsibilities as a 911 dispatcher?
I answer business and 911 emergency calls, and I also dispatch officers on the radio.
And ma'am, for those of us who don't know, how does that dispatch process work? Kind of, where are you located? What are you working on? Are you using computers and radios simultaneously? Can you kind of walk us through a call?
A phone call?
Say you get a 911 emergency call. What happens?
911 emergency call comes into the call center.
We have 8 call-taking positions. It comes into the call center. We answer 911, what is the location of the emergency. We take the address, and we load a call for service if it's deemed necessary.
And so that you make a decision as to whether or not to initiate something called a call for service?
Yes.
And what happens if you do that?
It is entered into our computer system, which is CAD, computer-aided dispatch.
And is there information that then starts being recorded automatically?
Yes.
And what kind of information gets recorded?
Any information that we type into our text that goes into the call.
Is it also keeping track of the time that things are happening?
Yes.
And do you have to type in the time as well, or is that done?
No, it's done by the computer.
Okay. And then is there a process for when you're done with the call? What happens then?
I don't understand. We disconnect with the call?
Sorry, when there's a call for service and the emergency's over, do you still have to, are you still working on the call, or what happens with the computer-aided dispatch?
If I was personally on the call and I was done, I would be done with that call. But if there's other calls coming in on that same incident, they'll still be entered under that call.
Is it possible for there to be several different dispatchers handling calls all for that same incident?
Yes.
And are incidents assigned a number so that you guys can identify which one is which?
Yes.
So that, for example, if you have an incident where you have a lot of people calling in, the different dispatchers are aware of which incident it is.
Yes.
And is all that information that's generated through the computer-aided dispatch, is that stored by APD, or does it just disappear right away?
It's stored.
And do you know how long it's stored?
Indefinitely.
In your experience as a dispatcher at APD, is that information, when you pull it back up again, is it generally an accurate representation of what happened at the time? All right. When you pull stuff up, you don't think to yourself, "Oh, this is a crapshoot. I don't know if I'm going to get something that's accurate or not."
Yeah.
And ma'am, were you subpoenaed to bring calls record in? I'll back up again. Does the 911 system automatically record the calls from the folks who are calling in?
Yes. Every single call coming into the call center and calls that we make out of the call center is recorded indefinitely.
And that's not something that you have to control. Is that just part of the system?
Yes.
Okay. And is that system, this is my last kind of systemic question for you, is all of that kind of pretty reliable and done in the course of business for APD? That is to say, it's not done for a specific case on a case-by-case basis. Okay. And ma'am, were you subpoenaed to bring a dispatch log and recorded 911 calls with you today?
Yes.
And do you have that call number?
It's 10-9790.
Okay. And is that the case number?
That's the case number.
Got it. And then what's the difference between a case number and a call number?
A call number is the incident number. Every call that you put into dispatch is given an incident number, and it starts over again at midnight.
Okay, so it's kind of on a rolling 24-hour basis.
Yes.
And then, how does that differ from a case number?
We could enter an incident for, say, an animal problem, like there's a moose in somebody's yard, and if it just walks away by itself, it doesn't need a case number. An officer's not taking a report.
Got it. So if there's a potential that an officer might take a report, it sounds like what your testimony is that call is then assigned a case number.
Yes.
Okay. So you were subpoenaed to bring with you here today a call number. Is that 100580608?
Yes.
And then that's associated with the case number 100009790?
Yes.
Okay. And ma'am, I'm just going to ask you when that call was initiated, and what does it mean? What does initiate mean in that context?
Initiated means when the call came into dispatch.
And what is that initiated time for this call and case?
6:27 p.m.
Okay. And what was the date of that?
February 27th, 2010.
And based on the computer-aided dispatch, can you tell what time officers were dispatched?
Yeah. Yes. The call was dispatched at 6:28 p.m.
Okay. And then I'm referring you perhaps to the second page of the computer-aided dispatch, or third rather. Can you tell at around 1845 whether or not there was a crime scene call out?
Yes.
Okay. And then can you tell us what time the call was closed? And I'm guessing that's probably towards the end.
It was
here.
closed at 4:34 a.m. February 28th, 2010.
Okay. And ma'am, you were asked to bring with you a CD today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. If I may approach the witness, Your Honor.
Yes.
Ma'am, I'm going to go ahead and take that and mark this as, for identification purposes, as State's Exhibit 114. And I'm going to ask you, are these the calls that are associated with this case that we were just discussing?
Yes, they are.
And is, just for the record, is the CD labeled 10-9790?
Yes.
And is that the same case number that we have listed there?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, with the court's permission, the State would seek to publish the segment that we've previously discussed, lasting approximately 3 minutes.
Approach. Okay, yes, you may publish.
Right at the mall, somebody was just shot. He was shot twice. He's inside, and he's right next to a Brady's. Oh, God, he's still shooting. He's still shooting.
Hold on here.
Oh, shit. I'm out here in the middle.
Hold on, we're going to get somebody to you.
Oh, my God. The guy you're looking for has a wig on. He has a fake mustache, a fake wig. He has a fake beard. He was standing here at my booth. Oh, my God.
He's white, black, or naked?
He is mixed black. Mixed black.
Did you say he was wearing a wig?
Yes, he had a curly wig on. He had a white sweatshirt. He had a white sweatshirt.
Okay, what direction did he run in the mall?
He ran towards the bus stop.
Is that going to be on the west side?
Turn him over. Put something under his head. Turn him over. I know that much. Here.
Okay, our victim's by O'Brady. By O'Brady, ma'am?
By O'Brady.
Okay, gotcha. How many times was he shot?
He was shot twice.
How was he shot?
I'm sorry, what?
Shot.
He was shot in he was shot in the face. Here. Put this under him. Put this under him. Oh, God. I don't know if he's breathing or not. Here. I don't care if my coat gets nasty. I don't care. Come on. Open the tunnel. Oh, my God. I'm sorry, what? I'm trying to help this guy.
I've got all kinds of help coming to you. What's your name?
My name is Debbie Barnett.
Debbie Barnett?
Yes. Help, get him over.
Tell me anything more about this black guy.
The guy that's with him, turn his head sideways so he doesn't choke. Sideways. Sideways. Turn him on his side. Turn him on his side. Oh my God, I think he's dead. Oh, turn him sideways so he doesn't choke. He has to turn him on his side. On his side.
Are you there?
On his side.
Get him up.
Hold him on his side, please, so he doesn't choke.
Debbie, are you there?
Yes.
I'm going to get you through to the ambulance, okay?
Okay. Oh my God. Did you clear his mouth out? You need to clear his mouth out. Make sure there's nothing in there. You've got gloves on, clear his mouth out.
Fire department, this is going to be right on, okay?
Okay.
And the next one.
Okay. Anything you can pull out is clear. I don't know.
What's breathing? He's not breathing. He's not breathing.
Not breathing.
Where are you at?
Yeah, right next to the bench.
Where at?
By Brady's, right inside the door. They'll be able to see us. Oh God, he needs help. He's dying.
Okay, so are you in the Diamond Mall?
Yes, at the Diamond Mall, right in the door, inside.
Inside near O'Brady's?
There's no pulse.
Okay, listen, what's the phone number you're calling from?
What?
What's the phone number you're calling from?
349-2827.
What's your
Oh my
first name?
God, don't let him die, please.
What's your first name?
My first name is Debbie Barnett. Somebody needs to do CPR. Does anybody know it? Get over here if you know it.
What happened to it?
Oh my God, he's been shot in the chest and the face. I think he's dead.
Okay, listen, I've got a couple questions for you while we get some help started.
Yes.
You get some clean, dry cloths and towels. I want you to put it on it. Press down firmly and don't lift it up to look, okay?
Okay, on his chest?
On both wounds.
Okay. The ambulance says take a white cloth, press it down on the wound, and do not move it.
Approximately how old is he?
Oh God, he's gone. He is about 25 to 30 years old.
Okay, and I just want to confirm if he
Right
awake.
here.
Is he awake?
No, he is
breathing.
He's dead. They're working on him now. Somebody's trying to do CPR to help him.
Okay, where's the person that did this?
He ran out the back door to the bus station.
Everybody go back that way. Is there serious bleeding?
Yes.
All right, I'm sending the paramedics to help you. Stay in line. I'll tell you exactly what to do next.
Okay, what do we do?
Like I said, I'm going to tell you how to stop the bleeding. Listen carefully. I want you to get a clean, dry cloth or towel, place it right on the wound.
Place it on the wound.
Press
Where's the wound?
and don't lift
Here it is, right here. Right here. Press. Do not let go. Keep pressing. Don't take it away to look.
Okay. All right, listen, I want you to lay up. Make sure he's flat on his back on the ground.
He is on his back. They're doing CPR.
Okay, is there some...
We can't give him any air, any breath, because nobody's got a mask.
Is there anything in his mouth?
No, there is not. They cleared his mouth.
Did you say that there's somebody doing CPR?
Yes, there's a person doing CPR right now.
Are they trained on it?
They're doing chest compressions.
Okay. Yeah, listen carefully. I'm going to tell you how to do the compressions.
Okay.
Make sure they've got the heel of their hand on the breastbone and the center.
They do. The paramedics are here.
The medic.
And he's...
Your Honor, at this point, the state would seek to introduce what's been marked as Exhibit 114 and published for the jury as State's Exhibit 114.
Counsel Perk. All right. I'll accept 114 will be accepted into evidence when modified.
Thank you, ma'am. I don't have any further questions.
Cross-examination.
Ms. Graybear, I just had a couple of different questions for you. You have a copy of the 911 CAD in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Is that right? Okay. And again, you said that you were a 911 supervisor. Is that right? Am I understanding that right?
I'm a dispatcher.
A dispatcher. Okay. When we talk about a 911 CAD, it's basically just a printout of the call for service.
Yes.
Right? Okay. And one of the things that gets included on that, when an officer gets attached to a call,
Yes.
then it's noted in the 911 CAD.
Yes, it is.
And that's just a matter of course. That's something that regularly happens, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. On this particular call, there were a number of officers that were assigned. I want to ask you about time frame on one officer in particular, though. You said that the call came in at 18:28 hours. Is that right?
It came in at 18:27. That call was entered at 18:28.
18:28:03. Okay. Going to page 4 of that 911 cat, about in the middle there, I want you to take a look at the entry at 19:53 and 35 seconds. Do you see where I'm at?
Yes.
Okay. And there's 2 entries there, both of which have to deal with an officer being attached to the call. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And that would be Pam Pernode, correct?
They're detective units, yes.
Detective unit, Pam Pernode. Okay. Immediately after that, 19:53 hours and 38 seconds, there's a notation, CHGLOCOS, that's change location, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the officer telling you, here's where I'm at, right? Okay. What's listed after that with her, the number that she's assigned, I-66, is PROV, P-R-O-V, correct?
Yes.
That would be shorthand for Providence.
Providence Hospital.
Providence Hospital, okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Either party wish or subject to recall?
Not the state, Your Honor.
You're free to go, ma'am. State may call its next witness.
Your Honor, the state's next witness is going to be Mr. Clifford Duncan.
Sir, if you'd remain standing, raise your right hand. Madam Clerk will swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give in this court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be seated. For the record, would you please state and spell both your first and last name?
Clifford Duncan, CLIFFORDCOLANDUNCAN.
Counsel, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Duncan. Sir, can you tell us a little bit about your background, your profession, where you live?
I work at the University of Alaska Anchorage, IT department. Live here in Anchorage.
And, sir, were you living here in Anchorage in 2010?
Yes.
And are you married?
Yes.
Is your wife's name Celeste?
Yes.
Are you a Costco member?
Yes.
All right. Did you go to Costco on February 27th, 2010?
Yes.
Do you remember speaking with detectives on the following day, February 28th?
Yes.
What were you talking to detectives about?
About some suspicious character I saw.
Did they find you, or did you reach out to APD?
I reached out.
And why'd you do that?
I thought it was odd, and I heard that there was something going on.
Do you remember what you told the detectives, what had caught your attention at the time?
What caught my attention was somebody that was disguised and not very well and acting suspicious, and just, it was odd.
And I'm gonna ask you some more questions about that. Was there something odd about the person's appearance?
That he was disguised?
Okay. And when you say that he was disguised, how so?
Like fake beard, mustache, wig, clearly trying to hide behind sunglasses and a fake disguise.
And was this outside the store or inside the store?
Just inside as we were going in.
And how long did this, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
And inside.
How long did this person kind of catch your attention for?
5-10 minutes.
Do you remember about what time of day this was?
It was in the evening before they closed.
Okay. And do you remember where inside you saw this individual?
Just inside the front door as we were going in, and then as we got in, he went in also, and we saw him on the, I guess it would be the west side of the Costco.
Do you remember what this person was doing at the time?
It would appear he was talking on the cell phone or had his cell phone pressed to his head.
Do you have any memory about this individual's demeanor?
Other than he just acted nervous, no.
Okay. Do you remember whether this person caught anybody else's attention that you saw at Costco?
Yes, there was another person that I thought at the time worked at Costco, and she was watching him too, noticing that he looked odd.
And did you see this Costco employee? How did you know this person was a Costco employee?
I had seen her there before.
Okay. And what did the Costco employee do?
She was just watching him like we were watching him.
Okay. Were you or your wife concerned about this person's potential behavior?
Yes, we thought something was going to happen. A purse was going to get stolen, or somebody was going to get assaulted or something.
I'm going to, Your Honor, if I may approach, I've previously previewed with defense counsel, I'm going to show Mr. Duncan what has been marked for identification purposes as Exhibits 117, 118, and 119.
All right, you can approach.
Mr. Duncan, I'm going to approach and show you 3 photographs. Without describing what you see in them, I'm just going to ask you if you recognize what you see.
Yes.
What do you recognize that as being?
Of the same individual that I saw.
And is that consistent with your memory as you testified here today?
Exactly.
And is that, do you recognize that part of Costco?
I do.
And what part is that?
That's the entrance part where you come in.
And sir, I believe you had previously testified that you and your wife had seen that individual in that area? Okay. And similar, consistent with how that person appears in those photographs?
Exactly.
Okay. Your Honor, may I publish now for the jury 117, 118, and 119?
Is there any objection to those 3 exhibits?
No objection, Judge.
Okay, they'll be admitted. You can publish.
So, Mr. Duncan, I'm publishing now for the jury 119, and you have 118 before you. Was your perspective when you saw this individual better or worse than the kind of grainy surveillance footage that we see here?
Mine was better.
Okay. And you had previously described observations that you made about the face. What observations had you made about this individual's face?
Well, there was a fake beard, goatee, mustache, dark teardrop sunglasses, and a wig.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Good morning, sir. Good afternoon, I guess. I just had a couple of follow-up questions. You described seeing this individual and his demeanor. He was acting nervous, right?
Correct.
Okay. He was looking around?
Looking around, yes.
Yeah. And he was on the phone, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The mustache, the beard was obviously fake.
Yes.
The hair was obviously a wig.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. The individual, he's walking around, he's nervous, he's trying not to be seen, correct?
It would appear that way, or...
He's got his hood up.
Right.
Right, okay. How long were you at Costco that day?
Half hour.
Okay. When you arrived, this individual, he was already in the store?
In the front part of the store, yes.
In the front part of the store, okay. And he left prior to you leaving, is that fair to say?
I lost sight of him while I was in the store, so I would only imagine so.
Okay. During the time that you were at Costco that day, did you see a younger black male in a Mets jacket, a big Mets jacket?
No.
Okay. During the time that you were at Costco that day, did you see this gentleman here in the front row in a white shirt?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Thank you.
Any redirect?
Just a few quick questions, Your Honor. So, sir, just one quick follow-up question. You were asked by Mr. Kelly whether or not this individual looked nervous. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you've also testified yourself that you and your wife were nervous. Is that correct?
Yes.
What were you and your wife nervous about?
Why would somebody be in a public place like that, clearly disguised and acting suspicious? Why that would make us nervous?
Did that individual that you saw have any physical contact with any other individual there?
Not that I saw.
Did he appear to interact with anybody kind of on a personal basis?
No.
Okay. Those are all the questions that I have. Thank you, sir.
Other party wishing the subject to recall?
No, Your Honor. Not from the state, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, sir. You may step down. Statement calls next witness.
Your Honor, the next witness is Miss Christy Hupp.
Okay. Just so the jurors understand, once an exhibit's admitted, it means you're going to get it back to consider, because I know that 3 exhibits have now come in, or 4, and you've seen the 1 photo. You will see all of them. You'll have access to them.
Your Honor, if I may approach the computer, I anticipate through this next witness publishing perhaps some visuals up on the screen. I'm not going to put them up now, but just to prepare.
Right.
Mr. Dog, it's the 5 that
We're going to walk right around to Mr. Alexander in front of the screen. Just remain standing when you get to the chair.
Ma'am, if you'd raise your right hand, Madam Clerk will swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give in this court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you. And for the record, would you please state and spell both your first and last name?
My name is Christy Hupp, and it's C-H-R-I-S-T-Y, and then H-U-P-P.
With the court's permission, may I address Ms. Hupp from here for a moment?
Yeah, just make sure the microphone's picking you up.
Good morning, Ms. Hupp. How are you doing?
Morning.
Ma'am, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and where you're currently working?
I work at Costco on Diamond. I'm currently a cashier, but I was loss prevention there for 9 years.
And, ma'am, were you working loss prevention in February of 2010?
Yes.
Do you remember an incident drawing your attention on February 27th, 2010?
Yes.
And tell us about that. What drew your attention on February 27th, 2010?
Well, myself and another boss were sitting by liquor, watching people come in because we're getting close to closing, and a gentleman walked in, showed his membership, and was walking towards me, and you could tell he had phony hair, phony beard, hoodie, dark sunglasses, and it's February, so it stood out like a sore thumb.
What happened after you saw this individual? What did you do next?
Told my boss, and he said, well, keep an eye on the guy. So I said, okay, and he walked down along past liquor and then the back aisles and was on his cell phone talking, and I walked on the other end, the main aisle, watching just to try and deter the gentleman, because we didn't know what he was going to do, but I wanted him to know he was being watched. And
what were you concerned about happening, ma'am?
Wearing a costume in February, it wasn't Halloween, so it wasn't good thoughts.
Okay. Did the individual that you saw, did he appear to you at the time to be afraid or scared?
No.
Okay.
Very confident in his walk, everything.
And could you hear or see what he was doing?
No, I could just tell he was acting like he was on his cell phone. He may have been, or may have just. I've acted like I was on my phone too in the past, but.
Right. Is it fair to say that you weren't close enough to hear that conversation, or do I have that right?
No, I would.
Okay. And did you talk to other folks that you worked with at Costco about this?
Yes.
Who else did you talk to?
One of my managers, William, and then another manager, Darren.
And why'd you talk to Darren?
William and myself were trying to get him upstairs on the cameras so he could get video of this person. While I watched, it was more William communicating with Darren, but.
Got it. So is it fair to say that you were on the floor, Ms. Hupp, watching this individual? You had Mr. Bragg somewhere, and then you had Mr. Akers controlling the cameras?
Correct. And I also, Mr. Pomerane, he was the gentleman I was communicating with on my phone, letting him know what was going on, and he was communicating with others.
Is it fair to say that within minutes of this person walking into Costco, there were what sounds like, based on your testimony, 4 Costco employees trying to monitor his activities?
Well, I was monitoring, and then the others were trying to do what they could from the camera situation and, you know, being my backup if I needed anybody.
Okay. And do you know if there was ever surveillance kind of footage taken of this individual?
Yes.
All right. And have you had a chance to look at that ever?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, if I may approach the witness.
Yes.
Ma'am, I'm going to place before you, put my hands on it, it's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 115 through 134. What I'm going to ask you to do is just take a look through these pictures, and once you've had a chance to scan them all, let me know when you're finished. Ma'am, do you recognize what you see in those pictures?
Yes.
And are those still images taken from your surveillance camera system?
Yes.
And do you recognize the individual who you see in some of those still images?
Yes.
And is that the same person who was making you nervous that day at Costco?
Yes.
And were you guys able to follow that individual on the surveillance photos both inside inside the store and outside?
No. We got him, not follow him. The pictures of him is as he's walking from the front end registers across approaching photo. We have a camera on the wall that's stationary, and you can see it's for watching people go out the exit and entrance in that one spot. So that's the indoor.
All right. Your Honor, the state, ma'am, you recognize all of those pictures I put before you? The state would seek to introduce exhibits 115 through 134 and publish them for the jury, and then ask Ms. Huff about them as we publish.
Any objection?
No objection, no.
Okay. 17, 18, 19 were previously admitted. The others are admitted at this time.
So, ma'am, I don't know if you're going to be able to see the screen here. Try to get this focus a little bit as well. And the other laser pointer.
It's right up there next
Okay,
to
great.
Yes.
the computer.
Oh. Ooh, I play with my dogs like this.
So, ma'am, I'm going to show you exhibits 115 through 134 now. And as we go through them here, I'm going to ask you some questions. If I could just ask Madam Clerk to maybe dim the lights here near the... Thank you. So, ma'am, I'm going to draw your attention here. We're looking at exhibit 115. And what are we looking at right here? I'm looking in the upper left-hand corner.
That's the gentleman.
And what part of the store is this?
That's the entrance door closest to membership.
Okay. And ma'am, it's hard to see up here, but your cameras also record the times.
As far as yes.
Okay. And in your experience as an employee and loss prevention employee at Costco, are those times and dates generally accurate when you're looking at your surveillance?
Generally, yes.
Okay. So what we're going to do here is rotate this. Okay. So, ma'am, we're looking at 116 now. And is this a shot from the same perspective as in 115?
Yes.
And is that the individual entering the store?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay. 117, was this what you were referring to as the stationary camera?
Yes.
And is this near the entrance area?
Yeah, the entrance would be on this side here, and the exit would be over here.
right.
So everybody, we had the exit door closed, funneling them out one door.
Got it.
All right, just so the record's complete, I believe you were indicating, well, I guess if you could describe what she was pointing to off the photo so it's on the record.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, ma'am, you were kind of gesturing with your hands
I'm sorry.
as we were discussing. No, that's fine. As we were discussing where things were, can you just describe in words kind of what you were talking about, just so we have it for the record?
Well, when you enter the building from the outside, the right-hand entrance door, the pull-up door, is what we use as an entrance. The left-hand side would be the exit.
Oh.
So we closed the exit door and had everybody funnel out the entrance door.
Got it. So people, and I think probably most of us living in Anchorage have been to the Diamond Costco. Is it your testimony that on February 27th, what is normally the entrance door was also acting as the exit door on that
Correct.
day? All right. So just from this, is this Exhibit 118, is this taken from the same perspective, ma'am?
From the same camera? Or
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
This is the camera above. Next to the exit door, there's a Coke machine, and it was above the Coke machine. The first two were taken from
Got
the
it.
jewelry cage, or the lockup cage next to photo. I didn't.
Okay. Yeah. So 115 and 116 were taken from the lockup cage. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then 117 here, beginning here, this is over the Coke machine.
Correct.
And 118, is that also from over the Coke machine?
Correct.
And 119.
Correct.
And is this the individual that drew your attention?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And is this the same person that you were describing here today earlier?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to continue here. Exhibit 120, what are we looking at now, ma'am?
He's in the parking lot.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it just, he'd exited the building.
And I'm going to cycle now from 120 basically through 130. 121, is this also a shot outside?
Yes.
Same with 122.
Yes.
Is this after the individual's left the store?
Yes.
One-
Finally.
123, 124 as he's walking. And I'm going to cycle back here to a fairly wide angle, 121. Is there anybody else that you see in that shot, with the exception of what appears to be this individual getting out of a car?
No.
Okay. What about in this one?
I don't see anybody except him and then the gentleman at the bottom.
All right. And so we're skipping back to 125 close up. Is this, again, what you were referring to, ma'am, as the fake kind of mustache and beard?
Yeah.
And
He also has his sunglasses off where he had them on in the building.
okay. So that's interesting. Is that your memory as well, that he had the sunglasses on inside the building?
Yeah.
And then this is February, 6 o'clock at night, February in Anchorage?
Yes.
And then outside the building, he's taking the sunglasses off?
Correct.
Why were you guys filming at this point?
Just that it just seemed really weird, and in case something had happened, we had some kind of documentation.
And to be clear, nothing happened. There was no criminal activity
No.
inside your store.
None.
But is it fair to say that you felt obligated to follow up and report him as he left as well?
Yeah, there was. This is where Darren was upstairs with the video and following. We just didn't know. I mean, you don't wear that kind of an outfit into a place of business unless something, like I said, it wasn't Halloween. So we didn't know what was going on. He stood outside the foyer after he went out the door. He stood outside talking on his phone for quite a while too before he went into the parking lot. So it was just weird.
All right. And ma'am, you spoke to the police about this case as well, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have for you. Thank you.
Okay.
Cross-examination.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
I just had a couple of follow-up questions for you. When you saw this individual in the fake wig and mustache, you followed him throughout Costco. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. You were in loss prevention?
Yes.
So you had an inkling, maybe this guy's here to steal something, maybe he's here to rob something.
Correct.
Just looks fishy. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. As you followed him, he was on his phone, then he'd be off his phone, then he was on his phone. Do you remember that?
All I remember, he was constantly on his phone. This is almost 5 years ago.
Sure. Let me show you actually a copy. You spoke with the police on the 28th, is that right?
Yes.
The day after, okay. And that was a couple of detectives, Detective Jake Wayne, Detective Foraker. Do you remember that? Okay. I'm going to hand you a copy of this here and actually have you take a look at the first page there so you can orient yourself. Does that appear to be a transcript of your conversation with the detectives?
Yes.
Okay. I want you to flip to page 3 of that. And you see at the top there, I've bracketed a little bit of what you told the police.
Correct.
And do you remember telling the police that he'd be on his phone, that he'd be off his phone, and
Yeah.
he'd be back on his phone? Okay. Thank you. You provided the surveillance video from that afternoon to APD, is that right?
Costco management did.
Costco management provided it to APD. The exhibits that we see there, the zoomed in, are those photographs that you took, or is that just zoomed in on that surveillance, or do you know?
It was from a video.
Okay.
I don't know how.
You don't know how that came about. Okay. Did you ever sit down and review the surveillance video yourself with APD?
With APD, I don't remember doing that.
Okay.
We could have done it the next day, but I do remember watching the video, yes.
Okay. They never asked to sit down, though, and review it?
I don't remember.
Okay. To the best of your recollection, do you remember seeing a young black male, 20 to 30 year age range, wearing a Mets jacket at Costco that day?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. To the best of your memory, do you remember seeing this individual here in the front row in a white shirt at Costco that day?
No.
No. Okay. To the best of your knowledge, do you remember seeing another young, dark-skinned male, light dark-skinned male, wearing a Oakland Athletics jacket, big green jacket?
No.
Okay.
Unless they were doing something that made us focus on them.
Okay.
No.
Thank you. Nothing further, Judge.
Any redirect?
Just one question, Your Honor. The only person who was doing anything that made you focus on them was the individual in those pictures?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Either party wish are subject to recall.
Not the state, Your Honor.
Okay.
All right, you're free to go, ma'am. State may call its next witness.
Your Honor, the state's next witness is Darren Akers.
Do you want these pictures?
You can leave them up there, ma'am. Thank you.
I'm going to come right through here. And you're right at the chair again. Out in front of the screen. And if you remain standing, that person's ready to go.
Please come up to the chair. Go ahead and raise your right hand, sir.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give in this court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may be seated. For the record, would you please state and spell both your first and last name?
Darren Akers, D-A-R-R-E-N, A-K-E-R-S.
Counsel, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Still, good morning. Good morning, Mr. Akers. How are you?
Just fine, thank you.
And, sir, where do you work?
Costco Wholesale,
And how long have you been working for Costco?
19 years.
All right. And what kind of things have you done for Costco during your 19-year career?
Various. I've been a manager in several different areas, forklift driver, stalker, cashier.
And, sir, have you ever worked loss prevention, or do you have any familiarity with the surveillance system at the Diamond Costco?
Yes.
All right. What were you working at the Diamond Costco on February 27th, 2010?
Yes.
Was there anything memorable from that day?
I believe that was the day that's around 6 p.m. we had a gentleman come in the store that looked suspicious. We were following.
Okay. And when you say you were following, what does that entail?
My loss prevention clerk was following him. He saw him come in the front door looking suspicious in suspicious outfit. I was on the camera upstairs. I wasn't following.
What's that loss prevention clerk's name?
Christy Huff.
Okay. Is that the person who was just in here?
Yes.
Okay. So at some point, did Christy get in touch with you?
Christy had another manager with her down there. I don't recall if she called me directly or if he did. I believe one of them called me and asked me to videotape.
And was your attention at some point drawn to that individual?
When I found him on the camera.
Okay. And did you find him in the camera kind of later on or at the time?
I would say later on. I believe he'd already been in the store walking around, and I didn't catch up to him until he was leaving the store.
Got it. Just to be clear, was the individual, we're not talking about days later necessarily, was the individual still in the store at the time that you started trying to find him on the surveillance footage?
Yes.
Okay. And did you and your folks from Costco ultimately end up providing APD with surveillance footage that you had copied off?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, I'm going to approach, if I may, Mr. Akers with what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 77.
You can approach.
And sir, I'm not going to ask you to unseal this bag, but I'm showing you an evidence bag labeled State's Exhibit 77.
No, that's correct.
All right. And is that the footage that was provided from Costco to APD?
Yes.
Okay. And was that some of the footage that you were actually able to look at the time?
Yes.
And then did you review it later as well with officers, or was that somebody else?
I reviewed it with officers later.
All right. And then made them a copy of kind of 3 different periods?
I didn't actually make the copy. I believe it was a different employee. But
okay. Do you remember whether the footage that you reviewed with the officers, whether that was kind of a fair and accurate representation of what you were seeing at the time when the situation was going on?
Yes.
All right. Did you attempt to get this person on surveillance only in the store or outside as well?
Both.
All right. And were you able to do that?
I picked him up outside. I don't believe I got him inside, but the stationary camera we had him inside.
Can you explain the difference between the stationary camera and maybe a non-stationary camera?
There were several cameras we could use. One was a stationary camera at the front door that captured the image of a person coming in and out. It doesn't move. The other one that I was physically operating is mounted outside the building and moves through the parking lot.
Okay. Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to publish to the jury 3 short segments of video that exist both on Exhibit 77 and State's Exhibit 5.
Defense?
No objection.
All right, you can publish. And let me ask, why do we have it twice?
One is the original that's sealed, Your Honor, that
Okay.
I wasn't going to open until detectives, and then the other is a copy that also includes Exhibits 115 through 134, the still images.
All right, but right now you're just going to publish
The
what?
videos.
Okay.
So, sir, first of all, I'm going to ask, just taking a quick look at Exhibit 115 here, these still images, as you flip through those, do those look familiar?
This is the front door of our building. Yes.
And do you recognize an individual? I think you're referring for the record right now to Exhibit 118. Do you recognize somebody in 118?
Yes.
Is that the individual who drew your attention?
Yes.
All right. And then I'm going to show you now, do you have multiple different cameras at Costco?
Yes.
All right. And so based on the CD that you provided to APD, did you provide footage from cameras 1, 6, and 5?
I showed them some screenshots. I don't know which camera it was on.
Okay. Well, I'll show you now, and tell me if you recognize what we're about to see. For the record, we're looking at camera, we're going to look at camera 5 here first. And what are we looking at here, sir?
That's the exterior camera that moves that I was operating, following him through the parking lot.
And it seems kind of jerky. Does it record in kind of 2-second increments?
Yes.
All right. So it's not full, it's not instantaneous.
It will play back jerky like that. So.
Got it. And were you actually controlling the camera at this point?
Yes.
Why did you follow the individual on the way out of the store as well?
Because of basically the disguise that he was wearing, we were concerned that he may be intending to rob the store. It just seemed prudent.
And, sir, did you make an effort to capture the license plate number of the vehicle?
Yes.
And as it starts moving here, are you able to move the camera as well?
Yes.
And you're manually adjusting kind of the focus at this point?
It automatically adjusts.
Or rather, where it's pointing?
On it. Yes.
And you were the person in control of the camera at this point?
Yes.
And sir, as we're looking here, did you follow the vehicle on its way out?
This would be as far as it would go, so until it leaves the top.
And just to orient us, the direction that vehicle is going, is that towards King Street?
Yes.
Okay. And then in the same direction as the Diamond Mall?
Correct.
So the other two are equally short. Your Honor, I'm going to publish the jury now for the record the footage from camera 6. Is this the stationary camera you were referring to, sir?
At the exit door, yes.
All right. And is this the individual that drew your attention?
Yeah.
And finally, sir, the last camera perspective that's listed on State's Exhibit 77 is camera 1. We'll take a look at that as well. And what are we looking at here?
That would be the entrance door.
And do we see that same individual coming in?
Same person coming inside.
Okay, thank you, sir. And at this point, Your Honor, the State would seek to introduce both exhibit, what has been marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 5 and Exhibit 77. Exhibit 5 contains both contain the same videos. Exhibit 5 also contains the still images as well that have been
Ones that have already been
exactly.
All right, defense.
Yeah, they're just copies of each other.
Yeah.
No objection.
Okay, they're both admitted.
Your Honor, I should correct that. The segments that we just saw in Exhibit 5 are cropped. They're much shorter.
Okay.
Exhibit 77 is a much longer period of time.
But with no... All right, perfect. All right, they're both admitted.
If I may have just one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I don't have any further questions.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Mr. Akers. I just had a couple of follow-up questions for you. When we viewed what we just viewed there, the first thing that I wanted to ask you about is that camera 5 evidence. You said that you are able to basically be upstairs at Costco, manually manipulate the camera, correct? Okay. What we're seeing there, is that the actual video, or is that you watch it and then you go back and take those screenshots later? How is that compiled to where we see that?
What we're seeing there is a portion of the entire video.
Okay. All right. You spoke with APD. You provided them a copy of that surveillance, correct?
Yep.
Okay, and is that surveillance for every camera, or is it just what we saw?
That was just for those specific cameras. There are others.
There are others. Okay. Did you provide them with all of the cameras for Costco that day?
No.
Okay.
They only asked.
They only asked for the ones that you were that you had recorded. Okay. Now, you were able to catch this individual on camera in the parking lot, you said. And in loss prevention, you all were concerned basically that he was there to steal things or rob the place.
Correct.
Correct? Okay. And you saw that he was leaving, but maybe he might be coming back later, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you're going to get that, save that footage so that if that does happen, then you've got it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. In your review of the video that day, or in your work that day, did you ever see a younger black male, age late 20s, early 30s, outside of Costco in a blue Mets jacket?
No.
Did you ever see him standing there looking like he was waiting on a ride or anything?
No.
Did you ever see another individual in a green Oakland Athletics jacket?
No.
Again, another mid-20s, late 30s range?
No.
No. Okay. Did you ever see this gentleman here in the front row in a white shirt?
No.
At Costco that day? Thank you. Nothing further, Judge.
Any redirect?
Just one question, sir. You didn't ever? Did you ever see that individual who figured in the surveillance footage that you followed? Did you ever see that person be threatened or interact with anybody else?
No.
No further questions.
Either party wishing, subject to recall. All right, you're free to go, sir. It's been about an hour. Why don't we take a 15-minute break and then we'll reconvene.
All rise.
We're back on record. The jurors have returned. Could I have counsel approach? All right, sir, if you could stand and raise your right hand, we'll swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give in this court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be seated. For the record, would you please state and spell both your first and last name?
First name is Michael. Last name is Lim. L-I-M.
And could you spell your first name, please?
M-I-C-H-A-E-L.
Okay. Counsel, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Lim. How are you doing? Sir, do you work at Korean Airlines?
Yes, I do.
And do you have any other businesses?
Yeah, the barber shop.
Okay. Do you still own that barber shop?
Yes, I do.
Did you own that barber shop in February of 2010?
Yes.
Just to be clear, were you in the barber shop when this incident occurred?
Oh, no, I wasn't. I'm not there most of the time.
Okay. Are you familiar with whether or not your barber shop had a video surveillance system installed?
Yeah, I installed actually.
Did you have one system or two systems?
He has a two system, but the other one is kind of black and white. Just kind of three system backs up. I mean, I kind of two system, but one has a hard drive records, and the other one I back up with the videotape.
A VHS videotape?
VHS tape, yeah.
Did you talk to detectives after this happened?
Oh, no, I wasn't. When the incident happened, I wasn't there, but someone called. They can take the VHS tape.
And did you provide the VHS tape? Was that provided to APD?
I was in remote location, and I said, yeah, it's okay to take it.
Did the detectives ever talk to you again about getting a different version as well?
Yeah, I was, I think a detective stopped by the shop, but I wasn't there. And now I remember he left the phone number. I didn't even know what it was, but I called back. It was a detective, I think. He was asking me if I have a better version of. I think he was there. Something he saw the system. Probably was asking if I have a better picture.
And is it fair to say the first thing you gave them permission to take was the VHS?
Yeah, I was asked. It was a phone call, and if they can take that VHS tape.
Okay.
I said, yes, go ahead. Yeah.
And then did you give them a CD or a DVD later on?
I was asked if I have a better picture. I said, yes, I do. It was a kind of hard drive, before elapsing it. After I trip, about 10 days trip, I came back. Before that thing erases it, I had to look at what happened. I wasn't there.
Okay.
I was checking in it, and then I was kind of surprised that, kind of felt that maybe it's important, so I burned it in the CD, and then I kept it, and I don't know, maybe
Did the police ever come and take that from you?
No. Yes. So I was asked if I have better picture, so I say yes, and then detective said, if you can have it. So I said, yeah. I kind of gave to him.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Sir, I'm approaching you with two originals in evidence, which for the purposes of for identification purposes have been labeled State's Exhibits 108 and 109. And I'm going to ask you if you recognize the CD and the VHS tape and whether that's what was provided to the police department.
Yeah, this was, I wasn't there, but I over the phone, I said, the police officer can take the tape.
Okay. And then you made a CD as well?
Yeah, and then I came back from trip. I saw that what happened, and before that hard drive erases it, I burned the CD and kept it.
And then was that CD provided to the police?
Later on, when I was asked if I have a better picture, and then I said I did. Yeah, I do have it, and I provided. I'm not provided. I was asked, so I gave to him.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you, sir. Your Honor, at this point, the state would seek to introduce what's been marked for identification purposes as Exhibits 108 and 109. I'm showing the defense counsel now.
No objection, Judge.
No objection. 108 and 109 will be admitted.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions. But you just have to...
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm a little confused. The hard drive is just another backup of the same view that the VHS is?
Yes.
Okay.
The hard drive, if I want to check hard drive, it takes time. So
okay.
The same picture goes to the VHS record.
Okay.
So
it's just one camera.
Yeah, one system. The other one is another one. But
okay. Thank you, sir.
Any redraw?
No, Your Honor.
Either party wishing subject to recall?
Nothing, no. Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You may leave. The state may call its next witness.
Your Honor, the state's next witness is A.J. Burkhart.
Right in front of the screen.
Right, yeah, you just have to go around the end. And if you remain standing, raise your right hand, and a clerk will swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give in this court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. May be seated. For the record, would you please state and spell both your first and last name?
First name Albert, A-L-B-E-R-T. Last name Burkhart, B-U-R-K-A-R-D.
Counsel.
Good afternoon, Mr. Burkhart. Do you currently work at the Diamond Center?
No, I do not.
Where are you working these days?
I work at North Star Behavioral Health.
Okay. And where were you working in February of 2010?
I was working at Diamond Center Security, and I believe I might have been working at North Star as well.
Okay. Was there anything memorable that happened on February 27th, 2010?
This is the shooting that occurred on the West End.
Were you in the store that day, or were you working?
I was working the floor.
Okay. And you were present when the shooting occurred? Not necessarily in the area of the shooting, but you were in the mall?
Correct.
Okay. Tell us what happened from your perspective.
I was making the rounds on the second floor over by what is formerly known as the Studio FX common area. I heard I believe it was two loud pops. As I was going down the escalator, I saw people running in an easterly direction. I advised other officers of possible gunshots and proceeded down to the West End. When, excuse me, I came around the corner by O'Brady's, I saw a group of people gathered around a subject that was laying on the floor that had been shot.
And did you make any observations at that point? What did you do next?
The person that was with me, he proceeded to conduct CPR. I was on the phone with the 911 operator, checked the area. As long as they were doing okay, I proceeded to go in south direction towards Forever 21 to see if the suspect was still in the area.
Okay. Did you end up finding the suspect yourself?
No, I did not.
All right. And was that kind of the end of your involvement in the immediate incident itself?
Looking for the suspect, yes.
Okay.
I was the officer that went back and started reviewing CCTV.
Okay. And by CCTV, is that the closed-circuit television or surveillance footage within the mall?
Correct.
All right. And were you, in fact, able to pull a lot of footage and provide it to the Anchorage Police Department?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to approach you, sir, with two sealed exhibits, and then we'll discuss some others as well, but two sealed exhibits labeled 75 and 85.
And I apologize, Counselor, what were the numbers?
75, Your Honor, and 85.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm not going to ask you to unseal these, but I will ask if those look familiar to you, sir.
This one does.
Okay. And which one is that?
75.
Okay. 85 isn't ringing a bell.
That might have been done by our then director, Larry Wims.
Okay. And then while you were, Your Honor, at this point I would move to admit 75.
Any objection?
No objection to 75.
75 is admitted.
Sir, while you were working with the surveillance footage, did you take some still images and some excerpts as well?
I believe we did because we attached them to on a photo page to the report.
Okay. And then after meeting with Mr. Henderson and I about a year ago, did you also email us a floor plan for the mall itself?
Correct.
As of, not as it currently exists, but as of February 2010?
That is correct.
And is that, as far as your memory goes, a fair and accurate representation of not only the kind of physical layout of the mall, but which store was which as of February 2010?
Yes.
And sir, if you could actually refresh my memory and tell me what exhibit number that is in the lower right-hand corner, that'd be great.
Number 3.
Okay. Your Honor, at this point, the state would seek to introduce what's previously been marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 3.
Any objection?
No objection, Judge.
3 is admitted.
So, sir, if you can just point out, if you can, actually, before you do that, can you, if I may first witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Can you describe, is that the whole mall or just a certain area of the mall?
This is only the west end of the Diamond Center.
Okay. Is it fair to say that you did actually give us the whole layout depicted here as well?
That appears to be the first floor of the Diamond Center.
Okay. And we'll just reference this for identification purposes as Exhibit 3A, Your Honor.
All right.
So going back to what happened during your search for the suspect, sir, you've testified that you reviewed the surveillance footage from that period, kind of that time around when it happened.
Correct.
And you said that you had kind of helped create a photo page.
Correct.
What was that photo page for?
Mainly for our records and any records that APD needed, showing the timeline.
And was that composed of some still images where you guys had circled some objects of interest? Do you remember that?
We did.
Okay. Your Honor, I don't believe there's an objection to this. I would seek to publish to Mr. Burkhart and the grand jury images contained on exhibit number 4 that have previously been reviewed with Mr. Kelly.
All right, you can publish.
All right. So, sir, I'm going to show you the photos that you and your team created or pulled from the surveillance footage. If I could just ask Madam Clerk to perhaps dim the lights.
Council approach. All right, Council, you may continue.
So, sir, can you tell us what we're looking at here from this perspective and maybe reference it on Exhibit 3 as well?
This right here is the kiosk, the Anchorage Bucks.
And you know what? I don't need this laser pointer. I think you need this laser pointer. So it's this middle button here.
Okay.
We'll take it away, sir.
Am I using them both?
Yeah, if you don't mind, yeah, just cross correlate here.
Anchorage Bucks is located roughly in this location. Just where I'd be sitting at would be the security desk where the CCTV system was located, or one of the monitors. On the opposite side, which would be the south side, is where the incident took place.
And sir, these pictures here aren't from the incident, is that correct?
Correct.
Were these taken afterwards?
I believe so.
Can you tell us what we're looking at here?
This location, according to my arrival on scene, is where the incident took place, which is directly right over here on the south side. Upon my arrival, coming around this corner of the Anchorage Bucks is where the victim was laying on the floor.
In that frame of view that we see right now?
Yes.
Is this an alternate kind of angle of the same image? Or it's from the same perspective?
That appears to be at a planter box one more space down.
Okay. What about here, sir?
This is the area where the victim was laying at.
And what's that object kind of in the upper left-hand quadrant of the screen?
This right here is the Anchorage Bucks kiosk.
Okay. And just what was the Anchorage Bucks kiosk?
It's a pull tabs.
And can you show us on the diagram of the floor plan where that was as well? Sir, is it fair to say that the bench isn't marked, but that the kiosk where the pull tab operation was located, that's marked?
Yes.
And what are we looking at here?
The same location where the victim was laying at.
And what's in the foreground there?
I apologize. That is O'Brady's. The other kiosk right there is the security desk.
Okay. And you mentioned the security desk, sir. Is that what we're looking at here now?
Yes, sir.
All right. And what stores are we looking at?
This is Bosco's. Next door is the barber shop. And of course, Anchorage Bucks. On the opposite hallway is Faux Saigon.
Okay. And sir, you have your team circled an individual here in this image. Do you see that?
In front of here?
No, in the upper left-hand corner.
Yes. Is it okay to stand up?
Yes.
With the court's permission.
I believe that is the suspect at the time that was viewing the victim.
Okay.
Are you referring to this one right here?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And here you use a red circle again. There's a blue circle. What are we looking at?
The suspect at the time walking around right outside Bosco's with the victim at the time.
Who's walking in front of who, for the record?
The suspect is in the white, and the dark clothing is the victim.
And sir, this appears to be a still taken from CCTV from a different angle. Can you tell us what we're looking at here?
This is located at the camera at the west Goshawk's entrance, facing the actual entrance into the mall. Not Goshawk's, Forever 21. The suspect is running into in essence, the north entrance, Forever 21.
Can you show us where that is on the diagram too?
Right here.
And that's the entrance that the suspect is running into?
Correct.
Okay. And just to help orient us, can you show us where that camera kind of is pointing?
The camera is located roughly right here in the corner in this direction, towards the entrance.
And this may seem redundant, but what's the figure that's outlined in red here?
The suspect.
And at what point in time?
Right after the shooting.
And here in the second frame?
When he's running into Forever 21, and he continues out through the south entrance.
And is that what we're looking at here, the surveillance imagery from the south entrance?
Correct.
And if you could just show us where that is, just because there's a couple different exits and entrances here. It's that one there?
Yes.
And for the record, Mr. Burkhart was pointing to the lower left-hand corner of what's been marked and admitted as Exhibit 3. And what are we looking at here, sir?
This is a gentleman that also exited the West Forever 21's mall entrance. He was seen to be brandishing a firearm.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but could you point out which entrance that is?
Right up here.
All right. And are these images of that same individual?
Correct.
And you've got a yellow square and then a blue circle here. What are we looking at?
The individual inside the yellow square is the suspect that we initially thought was the suspect. The item in the blue circle is a handgun that he's carrying.
Okay. And I'm just going to ask you to clarify one point. You referred to two different individuals as the suspect. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is it fair to say at the time, when you're first reviewing this, you're trying to figure out who the suspect was?
Correct.
Based on your review, was the suspect the person in this dark colored jacket or the person in the white colored jacket?
He's the one in the white.
And here, sir, what are you outlining in this image?
The initial suspect that we thought was the shooter. He's going down because the court CSO officer is right here, who came out the entrance, is telling him to get down on the ground.
And is that what we're looking at here as well?
Correct.
All right, sir, one moment. Thank you, sir. Those are all the questions that I have on direct examination. Your Honor, and I apologize, the state would seek to introduce those images that have been on CD4, which is what we've been looking at, Exhibit 4.
All right, 4 is admitted. Cross.
Lights. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Burkhart. I have a few questions. First of all, you said that after the shooting you went and you reviewed the CCTV, the closed-circuit TV. Okay. You were looking to see what, if anything, was captured on CCTV.
Correct.
And then you made a copy and you gave it to APD, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, the CCTV that you've got, and we see some of the stills there, is that monitoring continuous or does it have skips and jumps within it?
It's a 24-hour system, but it does have skips.
Okay.
It's set for motion detection.
Okay. And the motion detection, it might be a little shaky sometimes.
It is, unfortunately, it's set to have a range.
Okay.
So if there's more motion, is what's picking it up.
Okay. for example, specifically when you reviewed this, there are points at which you see Mr. Gray and Mr. Matos walking out of Bosco's, but then it'll skip, right?
Correct.
There are points at which you'll see Mr. Johnson walking around, but then it'll skip, right? Okay. So it's not one continuous frame of action. Correct? Okay. You were at the mall that day. Were you head of security that day?
No, I was not. I was a lieutenant.
A lieutenant, okay. You were familiar, though, with events that were going on at the mall that day?
Correct.
Right. You may or may not recall, but do you remember that there was a celebrity there from the Disney Channel that day?
If he was on day shift, I was not there.
Okay. Somebody named Sterling Knight from a show, Honey with a Chance. Do you recall that event?
I do recall that one.
Okay. A Disney show,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Now, but you don't recall what time that event was?
No.
Right, okay. When did you show up to the Diamond Mall that day? What was your
That
shift?
time, our shifts were 3:30 to midnight.
Okay. And that individual was not there when you were there?
No.
Right, okay. And when I say that individual, I mean that celebrity, Sterling Knight, whoever he is. All right. Now, with respect to the cameras, you described the still that we saw of Mr. Gray running into Forever 21, and you showed where that camera was at. Could you show the jury that again?
Okay, right at this one.
Okay. And so it's right at the junction there of that entrance to the larger Forever 21 store, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the video of Mr. Gray exiting, that's at the very bottom of that exhibit, right?
Exiting the building down here?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And where Mr. McCarty was taken into custody by Trooper Mangold, that was on the left side, correct?
Correct, right here.
Just above the Forever 21 store. Now, there's another entrance up by O'Brady's Burgers, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, can you show the jury where that is?
There's the entrance right here.
Okay. Now, the CCTV footage that we have, where you took those still from, where is that camera located?
Roughly in the intersection of Billabong and O'Brady's.
Okay. And that shoots directly down the hallway, as we saw, correct?
Right through this area.
Okay. Where are there other security cameras in that area, if any?
At the time, those were it.
That was it?
Right.
Okay.
With the exception of the one outside this entrance.
Okay.
And this one.
Okay. Is there a CCTV camera that records the entrance outside O'Brady's Burgers?
There is.
There is. Did you review that evidence?
I cannot say I did. I'm not sure Larry Williams did.
Did you provide that evidence to APD?
Anything that we had, we provided.
Okay. You saw the individual wearing that green jacket on the video where Trooper Mangold was, right?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have any footage? Were you able to get any footage of that individual coming into the mall?
At this time, I do not recall that.
Okay. After the situation had calmed down somewhat, you started talking to a few people there, correct?
Correct.
And police responded fairly quickly.
Correct.
Right. And it wasn't just one officer, it was a number of officers, right?
Correct.
Okay. They were all over the place, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you spoke with a Debbie Barnett, do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. She's the woman who runs that pull-tab kiosk.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. And you wanted to get a statement from her to find out what it was that she saw.
Correct.
Right? Okay. Now, the reason why you were reviewing the CCTV footage, the reason why you were talking to the people there was because you wanted to get as much information as you could, correct? Because you wanted to be able to provide that information to APD, right? Because you wanted to provide that information as quickly as possible so that APD could find the person that did it, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Redirect.
Sir, you did pull the CCTV footage looking towards Forever 21, where you pulled the stills that show Bosco's on the right. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to show that to you now, I believe by stipulation, with the court's permission.
Objection. Okay.
And sir, all these angles are among those that you provided to the police and that have already been entered into evidence. I believe is Exhibit 75. Last but not least, this is what's been labeled as CCT7.avi. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
All right. So I'm gonna ask you to describe kind of what we're seeing on the screen here.
Right here is just normal occurrence, mall activity, shoppers walking around the various locations.
And we do see a skip, and I believe Mr. Kelly asked you about the skipping.
Correct.
And I think, is it fair to say, sir, that you haven't edited this video yourself, is that correct?
No.
All right. And so when there are skips, is that a result of your system?
It is.
All right. And sir, it's fair to say also that this is before the shooting, is that correct?
Correct.
What about now?
Right now is when the actual gunshots were fired.
And do you see a figure in white in the upper left-hand corner running away towards Forever 21?
Yes.
Sir, at any point in this footage here in CCTV 7 facing down the hallway, which is contained on exhibit number 4, do you see anybody threaten or menace? And then do we see Officer Mangold here?
Officer Mangold, he was the individual standing next to the security desk.
All right.
And as soon as the shots took place, made sure his family was safe, and he gave pursuit.
You've identified the individual in the white jacket as a suspect, is that correct?
Correct.
At any point in your review of this CCTV footage, do you see that person assaulted by any other individual?
No.
Thank you, sir. I don't have any further questions.
Cross-examination as to that aspect, since that went beyond the original, right?
The views that we saw Mr. Alexander going through, to your recollection, those are the only footage that you pulled and provided to APD, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other party wishing subject to recall.
I just want to make a clarifying point.
Okay.
We didn't watch all of the footage that you provided to APD, is that correct?
Correct.
But
Hang on, approach. We're not going to go back and forth.
Mr. Burkhart, my question, just to be clear, was those views that we saw, not just the footage, but those camera angles, those are the only angles that you provided to APD?
Correct.
Correct. Thank you.
Either party wishing subject to recall?
No, Your Honor. No.
You're free to go. State may call its next witness.
Your Honor, the state's next witness is going to be Marcel Henderson. May we approach this quickly?
Yes.
You can follow me. Just keep following me. You're gonna walk around the bar here right in front of the screen. Come up here. Just remain standing. I'm at a purpose for you.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give in this court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. May be seated. For the record, would you please state and spell both the first and last name?
Marcel Henderson, MarcelHenderson.
Counsel may inquire.
Good afternoon, Mr. Henderson. Where are you working these days?
I'm an apprentice through the local 302.
What were you doing back in February 2010?
I was working loss prevention for Forever 21.
Got it. Before you started working loss prevention, what were you doing?
I was a general laborer at the municipal transfer station.
So in February 2010, sir, you were working at Forever 21?
Yes, sir.
And were you working there in the evening of February 27th, 2010?
I do believe so, yes.
All right. Do you remember anything memorable from that evening?
Just the end of my shift, doing a closing sweep, and then seeing the incident take place.
Tell us what you saw.
It's been 4 years, so I mean, it's definitely not completely clear. But I do remember rounding the corner, doing my final sweep, and then I watched the guy take a weapon out of his hoodie and shoot the other guy. And I remember after that, I ran back into Forever 21 and told the management to start locking down the doors.
Why'd you do that?
Just to prevent anything else from going on. It was just what I thought was best to do. I didn't know exactly what was going on, if there was more, anything like that.
Did you see where the shooter went next?
Yes, he turned and ran down the hallway through Forever 21 and actually exited the south side doors.
Was that something you were able to see?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you maintain visual contact as that happened?
Not completely, no.
When did you lose sight of the shooter?
Right after the shooting, I turned, ran back into the store, and when I entered the store was when the person ran through at the same time, because I went through one way and rounded a corner, and he came through another side.
And so, sir, I don't mean to interrupt you, but there's a laser pointer there, and the red kind of line button in the middle will activate the laser part of it. And if you look behind you, I'm going to ask you if you recognize what's been marked as Exhibit 3.
Yes.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That is the layout of the Diamond Center Mall.
And is that, as far as you can tell, accurate to your memory of what it appeared back in February of 2010?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you use the laser pointer just to show us where you remember being when you saw the shooting?
I had just rounded this corner right around here. That section.
And sir, can you indicate roughly where the shooting occurred?
This section right
here. And as you rounded that corner, you've identified one person as a shooter and one person as a victim. Is that correct? That's what you saw?
Yes, sir.
All right. Did you see the victim do anything to the shooter?
No, sir.
Was this a two-way gunfight going on?
No, sir.
All right. right. Did you see anything happen to the person you identified as the shooter?
No, sir.
All right. Tell us, as best you remember, what you remember seeing when the shooting took place.
The mall was very crowded that day. There was a celebrity, and so there was a lot going on. And I don't know why I looked in that direction when I did, but it just happened to be that I looked right as they were pulling the gun out.
And I'm going to stop you for a second just to clarify. You say they were pulling a gun out.
Or he, I'm sorry.
And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. Was one person pulling out a gun or more than one person?
Just one person, sir.
Okay. And what happened next?
The guy shot at the victim, and that's when I turned back around and went back into the store.
Do you remember what the victim was doing when he got shot?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you remember how many shots you heard?
Not precisely.
Okay. And, sir, do you remember giving a statement to police at the time?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you know that there's a transcript also of that interview as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, with the court's permission, I'm going to approach in a moment and show you two different things and see if that refreshes your memory a little bit, just as to just a few of these questions. I'm also going to ask, in addition to actually witnessing the events as you testified, did you provide any surveillance footage to APD?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that where APD got the surveillance footage from inside Forever 21?
Yes.
If you remember, I've got just a general question about how that system works. Does the mall do the owners of the mall control the surveillance footage inside your store, inside Forever 21?
No, sir.
Was that a standalone system?
Yes.
And was that something that you had access to?
Yes.
And when you were working as a loss prevention manager at Forever 21, was that system fairly accurate and reliable?
Yes, sir.
All right. And did you end up providing that footage from that incident to APD?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
So, sir, I'm going to put a couple things here in front of you. The first has been marked for identification purposes as exhibit number 14, and I'm just going to ask if you recognize that.
Yes, sir.
And can you describe what that is?
That is my sketch from my interview with the officer.
Yeah. Did the detectives ask you to draw out kind of what you had seen and what the positions were?
Yes, sir.
All right. And did you in fact do that?
Yes.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, the state would introduce exhibit 4, what's been marked for identification purposes as exhibit 14.
Any objection?
No.
14 is admitted.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish 14 on the screen?
Yes.
And so, sir, what I'm going to ask you to do is to just, using your sketch, which you'll have in front of you there, I'm going to put a big version up on the screen and ask you just to show us how the sketch lines up with what we see on the diagram behind you, okay? Assuming technology cooperates. All right. Okay, sir, so it's a little upside down, but is this what we're looking at up on the screen, the same exhibit 14 you have in front of you?
Yes.
And can you orient us on the screen as to what your markings are and what we have on the diagram behind you in exhibit number 3? And you can use that laser pointer there too in front of you. That'd be helpful.
Okay. So you just want me to show you what?
So for example, I see, sir, an X that's marked MH on exhibit 14. I see writing that reads JRC Watch Repair, a box that says PT, circles labeled BNS. Can you just show us where those are here and what those mean?
Yes, sir. The MH with the X, that's where I was at the time. Here, that's shooter, and the V is victim. This was a pull tab station. I think it's actually still there today.
And so, sir, when you rounded that corner, had the shooting happened yet or not?
No.
So is it fair to say that you were able to see the shooting from the time it occurred until the time that it finished?
Yes.
And during that time, how many people did you see acting aggressively?
I couldn't give you an honest answer on that. I mean, it was already crowded there, and I had the line of sight. I saw it happen, and then after it happened, everyone kind of scattered and ran around. So I don't have an exact answer.
Was the shooting, were there any other violent incidents that drew your attention before the shooting itself?
No, sir.
And do you remember what the individual was wearing? The shooter, that is.
Not particularly, no. I reviewed the statement that was provided to me, but as far as my actual memory on it, I do not.
As you said here today?
Correct.
Okay. Do you remember, did that transcript seem accurate to you of your conversation with the detectives?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember telling the detectives that your mind started racing when you saw a dark male with a white hoodie on, reach into his right pocket? And I always watch people when they reach into their pockets. It's my job to watch. And when he pulled out the gun, I was like, oh shit.
Yes, sir.
And sir, I've also placed in front of you Exhibit 74. It's labeled 3 CDs of video surveillance footage from Forever 21. Do you recognize those CDs as the ones you provided to APD?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this point, the state would seek to introduce what's been marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 74.
Any objection?
No objection.
74 is admitted.
If I may just have one moment with Mr. Kelly, Your Honor.
Yes.
Your Honor, I believe by stipulation of parties and the play a portion of the surveillance footage that's already been admitted, which is also exists on the same CD as Exhibit 14.
All right. No objection to this. You can publish.
So, Mr. Henderson, I'm just going to ask you to watch what's been labeled Forever 21 video excerpt. And just for the record, I'm starting this over again since it was obscured for a moment when it started. So what we're looking at here is that, do you recognize what we're looking at the beginning of this frame? What that perspective is?
Yes, sir.
And can you show us where on the map that is?
That on the map. Right.
So, for the record, the video file labeled Forever 21 video excerpt is 27 seconds long, sir. So I'm just going to ask you to take a look at this, and then I'll ask you a few questions about it, and then I'll be done. So, sir, did you recognize what you saw in that video?
Yes, sir.
All right. And I'm playing the middle section here at 9 seconds in. What perspective is this? What are we looking at here?
That is the south side camera facing north into the mall.
If you don't mind showing us as well on the diagram.
That camera is right over here. That's where the register is, right over here, if you're seeing. And then that's the entrance. And then here's that hallway.
And did you see the individual running through the store?
Yes, sir.
Was that the same individual that you previously identified as the shooter in this case?
Yes, sir.
And do you remember roughly where you were when he was running through the store?
Yes, I was right here in this section.
And sir, if you could also indicate on the screen, again, we're at about 9 seconds in, would that be on towards the right side of the screen?
Yes, sir.
Would it be fair then to say that you had kind of a profile view as the shooter comes running in front of you?
Yes, sir.
And do you remember hearing the shooter saying anything?
Yes, sir.
What did you remember him saying?
I remember him running in and saying, "Everybody get the fuck down."
Does that also, in addition to his movements, explain why your cashier here ducks down?
I do believe so.
Judge, I object to that. I mean, that's
Okay.
speculation on this part.
Okay, I'll withdraw the question.
All right. And basically, I'm sustaining the objection, so you need to disregard that answer. He doesn't know what the checker was thinking.
But I'll rephrase the question if I may, Your Honor. You're standing with a view of this incident as it occurred, sir?
Yes, sir.
And as this individual is running through the store, he's shouting, "Get the fuck down"?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And sir, just to confirm, you yourself personally made the CD that's already been admitted and provided that to APD?
Yes, sir.
And sir, do you remember being asked if you yourself saw anybody else with a gun that night?
Yes.
And do you remember what your answer was or what your memory is?
I do not remember.
All right. Do you remember saying that you didn't see, did you see, being asked if you saw anybody running with a gun and saying, "Oh, not with a gun, sir, no"?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. I'm going to, if I may approach you.
Yes.
Just going to ask you to take a quick look.
Okay.
Did you make that statement to police at the time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Mr. Henderson.
Afternoon.
I just had a couple of follow-up questions for you. You described that when you came around the corner out of Forever 21, you looked up and you saw the shooting take place.
Yes, sir.
And let me have you again point out to me, where were you standing when you saw the shooting take place? Just point it out there. Right there. All right. Now, your testimony was that when you turned the corner, you looked, you saw him pull the gun, it was instantaneous, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You didn't see any of the lead up to it, correct?
No, sir.
You didn't know it was going to happen, right?
No, sir.
And you weren't taking note of whether there was anybody standing in the background there, correct?
Correct.
Okay. It was instantaneous, you heard the shot, and then you booked it back inside, right?
Correct.
Okay. You're a loss prevention officer at Forever 21 at the time. I imagine they train you on looking at people, surveillance. You said, I always look when people go into their pockets, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But one of the things that they don't provide you with is a firearm, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you were there, you heard shots, and you booked it back inside. You came around, it sounded like, to, again, show the jury where you were when you saw Mr. Gray come through.
Here.
Okay, right down there. Now, in this time frame, we're talking a matter of seconds.
Yes, sir.
Right? And in this time frame, your heart's pumping, right?
Yes, sir.
Your mind is racing, correct?
Yes.
You're running, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that's when you saw Mr. Gray dash through, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it's your testimony that in that dashing through, you heard him say those words.
Yes, sir.
Get the fuck down, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you heard that, and what we see on the video, Mr. Gray wasn't pointing his weapon at anybody.
Correct.
Right? He was running, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The state asked you what you thought the clerk was doing there, but that statement, if you recall it, that could be open to interpretation, what that meant, right?
Yes, sir.
And the reason why somebody would be saying that, right?
Yes.
Okay. When you spoke to the police that night, you spoke with them at the police department, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And does it seem correct, your recollection, that it was around 11 o'clock?
Yes, sir.
That night? Okay. And so, in between the time when you saw this and when you went and you made these statements, you sat there for a few hours, right?
Yes.
And there were other witnesses that were there too, right?
Yes, sir.
Was everybody kind of talking things through?
There was people talking. I personally was dealing with APD the entire time.
Okay.
Telling them what I had seen and providing them with video footage. And after the video footage was provided, they asked me to please get in a car with them and go down to the station, I guess you'd call it, where they had us kind of segregated out.
Okay. And they asked you questions and you made the statement. Do you remember telling the police that night that when I see up the hallway, it looked as if there was about to be a confrontation?
I don't remember, to be honest.
Okay. You talked in direct examination about there being some celebrity that was there that day, right?
Yes.
That was earlier in the day, though, correct?
I think it was just finished up.
Okay.
Right after.
Does it sound right to you that it was somebody named Sterling Knight from a show named Sunny with a Chance? Disney show or something?
I couldn't tell you who it was.
Okay. Now, we heard what you recall about what you testified about Mr. Gray saying. Also, though, when you spoke with the police, you remember telling them that you thought you heard 3 or 4 shots.
I do remember that I was varying on the number, but at the same time, there was a lot going on, so...
A lot going on. Everything was going quickly, right?
Correct.
Okay. Do you remember telling the police that when you turned that corner and you saw this happening, you were a good 15, 20 feet away by your estimation?
Yes.
Right, okay. And the last thing that I wanted to talk to you about, we saw the diagram that you drew, Plaintiff's Exhibit 14 or State's Exhibit 14, and certainly that's not a drawing that's to scale, right?
Correct.
Okay. And in fact, it doesn't have any of the other obstacles that were in the way there, correct?
Correct.
Okay. there's another kiosk down here by where you were at?
I don't remember.
Don't remember? Okay. There's some kiddie rides here?
Yes.
Correct. Okay. And again, that's not to scale, but you're saying that where you were at was right down there at the end, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, the camera that you provided that we saw where Mr. Gray runs into Forever 21, that shoots that hallway that shows that entrance there on the left-hand side of exhibit, I think it's 3 behind you, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you actually show the jury where I'm talking about? What angle is that going from and what is it showing?
That camera it's right about here.
Excuse me, not
I'm
that
sorry.
camera.
Oh.
The one where we saw Mr. Gray run in, that long view, and he just runs in the entrance. You remember seeing that?
Oh.
What camera is that from?
It's one right here on the corner.
Okay. So it shows, generally speaking, those exit doors there to the, is that the west?
That would be to the west, yes.
Yeah, okay. You reviewed that camera, right?
Yes.
You reviewed it with APD?
Yes, sir.
Correct. Did you see in that camera, did that camera capture a male in a green jacket running out that door?
I don't remember.
Did it capture Trooper Mangold running out that door after him?
I don't know.
Okay. Did it capture another individual running down the hall and then running back up to the scene?
I don't know. There's a lot of people running.
Sure.
So.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any redirect?
Just one question, Your Honor. Just to clarify a point, Mr. Henderson, about a question that Mr. Kelly asked you. He asked, there's questions about how many shots you heard. Do you remember those questions?
Yes, sir.
All right. Was it your testimony here today that you also saw a shooting?
Yes.
Okay. And even though it's fair to say that it's been a long time since this happened, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. But has your memory of actually having seen a shooting changed?
No.
All right. Do you think that's something that you will forget?
Probably not.
Okay. Thank you.
Either party wishing subject to recall?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you're free to go, sir. State, you have another short witness?
Permission to approach, Your Honor?
Okay. Members of the jury, we're at a point where the next witness we wouldn't get through him, so we're going to go ahead and recess today a little bit early. Remember, we don't have trials on Friday. All right, so you're next going to be in here Monday, and we're going to ask you to be here at 9 o'clock. We have some matters we need to take up outside the presence of the jury that we're hopeful we'll get accomplished by 9 o'clock. So if you could be here at 9, remember you come just back to the jury room. If you want to come earlier, you can. It just means you'll sit back there longer. Okay, leave your notes there. Madam Clerk will gather them up. You're free to go.
Please rise for the jury.
Please be seated. Any additional matters for today?
Just very quickly, procedurally, Your Honor, what we just watched was exhibit number 9. What's been marked for identification purposes is exhibit number 9. That's what's in the computer right now. That contains a CD that contains both the sketch and this 27-second stretch of video. I would move to admit that now. I think I forgot to do so earlier.
Right.
That's fine, Judge. And I'm getting a little concerned about making sure that we got the right things on the right disc.
And I'm happy to review everything.
Right, there does seem to be a little bit of duplication. Some of the
And Your Honor, just the logistics of having had the CDs in at APD has meant that there's been a little creativity here, but I'll review everything with
Right,
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly's comfortable with that. All right, 9's admitted. We'll be Mr. Kelly, anything else?
No.
All right, we'll be off record.
Please rise.
And just so you can go off record, I've got arraignments and bails again today, guys, so they're going to be coming. I know, I picked up a second. So.